Cool, we're back. So, we are recognizing that if there is an order, right, to the logos that we're seeing in this dialectic thing, then we want to know why, after he does his, gives his defense of philosophy. Let's bring up the text. This is his great doctrine. I'm going to, he says, by the way, a person who has truly spent their life being engaged in philosophy will be of good cheer when they're about to die, and they'll be of good hope that they will attain the greatest good there upon completion of his life. Okay? And he says, by the way, the others happen to be unaware that those who pursue philosophy correctly pursue contacting nothing else than dying and being dead. And he gives his explanation of what that entails, what kind of death it is, separating the soul from the body, how other people who are mastered by their body are mastered by their pleasures and go around eating and drinking and looking for lots of sex and developing their body and getting clothes and shoes and ornaments. But a philosopher isn't interested in that. They want to turn around towards the soul and liberate from their physical body and being enslaved in that way. They also want this thing called self-mindfulness or self-renaissance. We don't know what that is. The soul grasps the truth, not through the body, but they want the real beings to be clear to themselves. Okay? This is, of course, the section which highlights the three uses of the word self that we also see reflected in our self-triad, our reasoning, our state of mind, and that which is experiencing both, or our logos, or understanding, our state of mind, or pure being, and the one self, which is the first cause, the first and final cause. Here we say, hey, is it not through the logos, the use of logosing, if indeed anywhere, that any of the real beings become clear to self? Okay, we looked at all of the past translation. This is a new translation by somebody called Juan Balboa. And we saw, hey, this is interesting. Because, what is it? 65C. Because those three key words, through our logos, one, the beings become clear to the self, we have this. Jarvis, can you please bring up the internet?
Importing all preferences from home interface.
Okay. So this is the previously best translation of the Phaedo. In thought, then, different from logos, if at all, something of the realities, not beings, not self-beings, become clear to it. The three essential parts: the logos, self-being, and the one self. We don't have in any other translation until this one. That's why we can awaken philosophy in a new way. That's why we can discover the puzzles that are there to be discovered. These are the three fundamental mistranslations. Okay? That's what we looked at before. Through the logos, we have the Greek underneath so we can see the word logos. The real beings, ontos, become clear to self. There's our triad. Okay? By the way, self-justice. These are the self-er terms. Self-justice. Balloons. Beauty, self-beauty, self-good. They're never seeing. Any of those beings are not seen with the eyes. Same with greatness itself, health itself, strength. And one logos, the ousia. That's another key word which we haven't had translated properly until now. The ousia of all the others. The ousia is the nature of turning about and mind knowing itself. That's also what we are trying to wake up through this activity of philosophy. What is most true of the selves is contemplated not through the body. But if we dianoia, so that's understanding with a capital U, it's not understanding things in the physical world. Dianoia is specifically understanding those beings. If you understand each self, that person will approach closest to the noesis, the knowledge. Now, we don't mean knowledge as in I know how to ride a bike. We mean direct experience through ousia of the beings. So your question, how do I do it? Through the most accurate dianoia of each self of the beings, do we become closest to that noesis, direct intuitive knowledge of them. Take notice then, the person who most perfectly does this is approaches towards being with the self-understanding, so the highest use of your understanding. How do we do that? By not associating their sight with their understanding, nor dragging any other sense perception, not one, with their reasoning, with their use of logos, but uses the dianoia, and that purifies yourself by yourself. And you try to track down each of the beings, uncorrupted, unmixed. Each of the beings. The being of beauty, the being of justice, the being of whole, the being of part, the being... We have a bunch of beings from our first hypothesis of Parmenides that you can find our read-along of Parmenides. The first hypothesis is the one self, but he uses all of those being terms. Whole itself, part itself, unlimited and limited, same, different. There's a whole list of them, but they can be directly known. And we do so by doing the dianoia separated from our senses, and that liberates oneself from the eyes and ears and the sum of the body, so that the soul, that's what gets there, the soul, can acquire truth and phronesis again. What the heck is phronesis? What? Okay. Simmias, who's listening to Socrates, says, oh, what you say is exceedingly true. How would he know? But okay, good. So there's a straight path of the logos. So there is a straight path with no deviations to guide us along with the logos. So take the logos with us. It's a mystic method, spiritual method, because you're experiencing the spiritual dimension, but you do it through logos. Not with the body as a corrupting agent. We'll never get what we desire if we're still attached to our body. It keeps us busy in a numberless ways through its need for sustenance. Diseases get in the way and impede us for our chase for reality. The body fills us with passions, desires, fears, illusions, foolishness. Not reality and not phronesis. Gives us nothing other than war, civil discord and battles, because we're enslaved to its care. No leisure for philosophy. And then even if we do get into philosophy, it comes pouring in. Boo! We can only behold the self-realities with the self of the soul. And we're lovers of this thing called mindfulness. He keeps rabbiting on about this mindfulness. So we can't intuitively know. Noesis. That's the word that means to grasp and know it by being it. You can't do it with the body, just with this self-soul. So we purify ourselves in this way until the divine self of the next dimension somehow liberates us. That sounds good. Want to get me some of that. Okay, you can direct your phronesis to the body. That's a puzzle. So whatever this phronesis thing we're after can be directed to the body, maybe. But we don't want that. And if we, this whole thing that we've just gone through again, summarized, is the doctrine that we repeat to each other. Oh, good thing I've repeated it again for like the 5th time. And we believe, at least all those who are right lovers of learning. Philomathesis. We've got philosophia, lovers of wisdom. Philomathesis, lovers of learning. And we repeat it. Don't you believe it? I do. So we start with belief. Right? We have to obviously develop our dianoia, our understanding, pull this stunt off and have the direct experience of ultimate reality. But we start with belief. You have to believe it's possible. You have to listen to this Socrates dude. Maybe he's onto something. Maybe the father of Western thought, as he's called, maybe he's onto something. Just a maybe, all right? And we got to repeat it. It's a discipline. It's a repetition. You got to keep doing it. And what better game is there to play? It's really the only game in town, I think. So, if this is true, this thing I've said, there's great hope that where I'm going, I shall be there and possess that which much diligent study in this past life has been all about. So this journey that I have to go on arises with good hope and leads those who have prepared their dianoia, just as they have been purified. So, hey, it's what we can do too. So he goes on to explain this purification. So he gives us some material and we use that to unpack it and do this activity of the dialectic, which is the application of our understanding through the logos without our senses, as purely as possible. So we take this. So dialectic has four parts. Definition. This purification is what we talked about. Okay, that's the definition. The next step is demonstration. Can you give a demonstration of that which you're defining? To separate the soul from the body as much as possible. Okay, and then maybe after you've demonstrated that, the person you're talking through still doesn't quite get it. Maybe they've understood it just with the word purification, in which case you don't have to go further, because the dialectic it's not debate, it's the opposite of debate. You're not fighting, you're coming together. We are adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Even Gandalf says so. So, defining your term, purification. I don't quite get it. Okay. Demonstration, number 2. Separate the soul from the body as far as possible. Still don't get it? Let me divide it. Division. Divide it into its parts. To accustom yourself to gather together from all quarters. Number 1. To collect self by self out of the body. Number 2. To dwell alone by self as far as you are able. Number 3. Both now and in the future. Number 4. Those are the parts of the yoga. Yoga means method. Okay? The fourth part of the dialectic is you take those divisions and you summarize it together, called synthesis, and then you apply it back to the first term. So how do we synthesize it? This is being liberated from the chains of the body. This liberation and separation of the soul from the body is called death. So all this, that's death. What do you say, Owen?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Simei says, yep, that altogether is indeed the case. So he's following, so good for him. Then only those who practice philosophy in the right way are always eager to liberate their self. And this liberation and separation of the soul from the body is the self, so the highest, the self-study and exercise of the philosophers. That's what we do. And we recognize from our work in the Parmenides that this study and exercise is the exact same language he says about the dialectic. Exercise in the way that it seems useless to the many, the dialectic. He asks Socrates, how are you going to exercise yourself in relation to philosophy? Oh, 2 quotes. Okay, we got to wait for one to go away. This is another part from the Parmenides. Socrates says, what then, O Parmenides, is the way of this exercise? So we're seeing Socrates in the Phaedo at the end of his life saying, hey, you need to do this exercise. Collect yourself together from all parts of the body. And then out of the body, collect self by self. Don't run around like a maniac. Collect yourself together. As far as you're able to. What were the parts? Both now and in the future. And be alone by yourself. Okay? And then he says, so at the start of his life with Parmenides, and again, you can see that playlist on the YouTube. You can. He asks this question, what then, which is your question you asked in the chat too. What is this exercise? Parmenides says, the way which you've heard Zeno was Parmenides' student. He's like halfway between Socrates and Parmenides in age. Except I was quite pleased with what you said to him, because you would not allow him to look upon the wandering that exists. Look upon the wandering that exists in relation to... Whoops, we missed a line. Okay, it doesn't read right. Wandering. Okay. You would not allow him to look upon the wandering that exists among the objects of sight. Let me fix that quote. The wandering that exists among the objects of sight and the wandering that exists in relation to them. Okay, let's bring up that quote one more time. I'm quite pleased with what you said to Zeno, even though you're a newbie. This is like day one. Because you would not allow him to look upon the wandering that exists among the objects of sight and the wandering that exists in relation to them, but to consider to those which one can grasp, especially by the logos. And in this way, one would be led to see the ideas. So that's the exercises that Zeno was doing that we saw was called the dialectic. And what's what we've been doing? We've been doing dialectics as we go. So there is a way of using the logos. It follows the dialectic: definition, demonstration, division, and synthesis. So our question is, okay, he's just given his defense. He's just explained what it means to actually do philosophy. And he's done the positive and the negative, the dialectic. You have to do both. What if the thing exists? What if justice exists in being? But also, what if it doesn't? There's two what ifs. Like what would follow? He did that. He went through, what happens. There's war. We're going to get driven out of our mind by our senses. So he's done all that. He's also explained how to separate the soul from the body. He said that's called liberation. That's the work of true philosophy. That's what leads you to what you want. Truth and also mindfulness. So why does he bring in this idea of mindfulness? Because this is the exercise of philosophy in the right way. Liberation and separation of the soul. That's the study of philosophy. So our question is, after doing all that, why is he, after explaining the correct life's work and nature of philosophy, purification and death, why did he go on to phronesis? There has to be a reason that it followed in that order. Okay? That's a question. To be on the quest is to have a question. So, those who practice philosophy correctly are studying to die, and you fear death least of all human beings, because we seek to have our soul self by self, crossed over from our body, and we are liberated. But also we are truly a lover of mindfulness. And he said, by the way, those who are not philosophers, are lovers of the body. Philosogitomatoes, philosomatos, lover of the body. Lover of honors, philotimos, from Timocratic. And lovers of riches, lover of cremated tomatoes, philocrematos. Philocrematos are lovers of riches. So that's a triad of what it isn't. And we have a triad of what philosophy is. So there's our lover of the body, lover of riches, lover of honors, is what it isn't, which is the mirror reflection of what is. So we want to know, the three words he's been using is philomathesis, lover of learning, philosophia, lover of wisdom, and philophronesis, lover of phronesis. Self-explanatory, but let's write it in. We do not have a word for this in English. The translator is using the word mindfulness as a placeholder. So we want to know what the heck is phronesis. Okay. Why did he bring up phronesis? Then he goes on to the virtues. Hey, the virtue of virility, to have courage. And also the virtue of sound-mindedness. Okay, so we go to the virtues. Just a quick reminder, they're in book 4 of the Republic, I think. If we look at our soul, we have the inner desire. That's the biggest part of our soul. Part of you that desires stuff, like a sandwich. All the things that he said that lovers of the body and riches seek. Clothes, shoes, ornaments, Bugattis, women's, right? There's the that's the Taoists represent it, mythologize it with the belly. The outward moving, so inner desires want a sandwich, outward moving wants to do stuff. What are you going to do with your day? What activity do you want to engage in? How do you want to live in the world? That's your heart. And mythologized by your head is reasoning. You got to plan what kind of sandwiches you want. You got to plan how to spend your day, how to get to the football game or whatever, or how are you going to reread the Phaedo again? So the virtues that are associated with this is sound-mindedness, temperance, sophrosyne in the Greek. Courage is how you move in the world. And wisdom. Sound-mindedness is aligning your soul in this way. Right? So if you desire things, why not desire what the smallest part of you desires? What does reasoning desire? Wisdom. Or rather, wisdom is the virtue, the logos. The virtue of wisdom is to follow the logos and seek the logos. So if you desire the logos and you outwardly move to master the logos and you're reasoning with the logos, all of the parts of your soul are unified as one with one goal. That's the virtue of sound-mindedness. You are not being pushed around by your desires. You have a unified soul. Courage is to hold on what your reasoning part says is true, what the logo says is true. All of this stuff we've been repeating and rereading, hold on to what that is true in the ups and downs of your life. Wisdom is the apprehension in nous that we talked about, that requires the separation of the soul from the body, as well as the understanding, the dianoia of that. So you can use that experience of reality as a paradigm to guide everything you do, or your planning, plan how you do stuff. So that's wisdom. If you have all of those together, that's the virtue of justice. That's the fourth virtue that sits above. Because if you have justice, then you're doing one activity, which is your intended activity at all times in your public business, in your private affairs. Oh, I'm just reconnecting to the chat room. Why is that? I hope I've been streaming this whole time. Have I been streaming this whole time? Something's happening with it weird with my OBS. Oh, good. So. Oh, cool. You're here listening intently. Glad to hear it.
Wow.
So, justice is doing your intended function in everything you do, only that one thing at all times. So justice is kind of what happens when you pull off these three virtues. So we can see this as a triad. So that goes into our triad skill tree. So we're developing skill trees. So we have a triad skill tree. So that goes into our threes skill tree. But also, if we have this one as well, we have another 4 skill tree. So we can have this as a 4. This is important because just like if you're playing a role-playing game or whatever, you develop skills in, like, let's say, so philosophy is like the ideal upon which all of the reflections into the lower dimensions, like Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, video games, role-playing games, so on, they are reflections of this. This is the true game. This is the best game in town. But let's say you've got two-handed skills. Does anyone discuss how this divine passion of the full logos, if I use the word rightly, comes about? I feel my heart was set on fire. That's a good question. In fact, I encourage you to hold on to that question. And not only hold on to the question, but polish it up. Like if you have a weapon, like say you've got a two-handed axe. Axe goes like this. Two-handed axe. You start with it, but you can sharpen it up. You can upgrade it. You can give it an enchant. You can level it up. That's the archetype that's based on is your question. Polish up your question. Sharpen the edge. Ask it in as few words as possible. Practice using it. Swing it around. Ask people that question that you have. The more you learn, the more you learn in your other abilities, the better you're going to get at this question. Take this question with you. How does the divine passion of the full logos come about? Because I recognize it myself. When I first came across this, my heart was set on fire. That's a good question. And to answer that question, you have to add in other questions. So like, what is the logos? What is my soul? How does my soul recognize the logos? What is this power or inspiration? Because you need power and inspiration to move. That's the outward moving part of yourself. Hey, if there's a part of yourself that moves outwardly with the virtue of courage, hopefully, you need some energy to get off the couch and move. You need some will to be able to move outwardly. You need some ideally, you want to be inspired. So these are all elements to your question. So take that with you and polish it up like a weapon. Upgrade it. And like our skill tree, you might have the two-handed skill tree. So you might get really good at two-handed axes, two-handed swords, two-handed something else. But what happens is, if you have this, so we're saying this is triad. So we have this triad of virtues. We might recognize another triad. Like we're talking about inspiration. Well, there's a triad there. Being, power, and activity. This is a fundamental triad in the logos. This is a triad. Add it to your triad skill tree. But what happens is you can take this skill and you can apply it to this skill, rub those two sticks of that skill tree together and gain a new skill or gain a new insight. That's the skill tree. So let's do it. Okay, we've got this triad and we've got this other triad of the virtues. Let's take them together. What's the virtues? Or the parts of the soul, let's say. Outward, inner, and reasoning. can we rub them together? Well, you talked about power. Can we understand more about inspiration and power by linking it to that part of the soul that moves outwardly? Inspiration. Inspiration will help you move outwardly. So maybe the more you learn about the nature of power itself, the more you'll be able to move outwardly, the better you'll be able to hold on to your courage. Well, that's another skill tree. So we can add the skill tree of courage, temperance, and wisdom. So again, we've got 3 branches of the skill tree. We can rub them all together. This is the Sherlock Holmes element of philosophy. We solve puzzles, but you have to discover the puzzles. And that's what we're doing. Key to discovering a puzzle is to have a question, and you've got a good one. So let's take another one. Being. Do we reason best if we can apprehend this realm of pure being that we're seeking in what Socrates is talking about in philosophy? Is wisdom apprehension of the being with the logos? So we have these 3 that fit together. That's the significance of triads. And that's what I encourage you to do with your question. Polish it up. Add it to a skill tree. So that was a little refresher, a crash course, let's say, in the virtues. So we can often the Greeks will use the word justice to refer to all of them, because justice is in all. If justice is doing your one intended function at all times, as a human being, you require these virtues to do. But you could say, well, doing your one intended function of your reasoning part is pursuing the logos. So justice is in there. Doing your one intended function at all times, holding on to the truth of reality in your ups and downs, pleasures and pains, fears and desires, that's your intended function of this part of your soul. So there's justice in there by having courage. To align your desires to seek, like you're saying, to be right back. What education do you have? Well, that's the thing. At university, I learned what Socrates is saying is the opposite of philosophy. Philosophy is opinions, and we don't engage in the dialectic, we engage in debate. Because there is no realm of being. All the things Parmenides says we have to do to be in the game of philosophy, I got taught the opposite. That's why we have to reawaken philosophy. Because this is one of our questions. Why did our learning stop at Socrates? In 529 AD, why were the philosophers killed and the university shut down? And instead of understanding dianoia and direct experience, knowing, we were told we have to instead give that up for faith, to believe some other joker in a funny hat. You can't understand, you can't even have the book, The Dark Ages. And you can't know for yourself, that's heathen. So that's the counterattack. When we have a new insight, we have a counterattack. The old traditions jump up and try and hold on to themselves. No. And they try and diminish your insight. You can't know that. You're just a this or a that. You can't know being. That's heathen. That's heresy. So that happens within us. That's why we have to be aware of those objections that come up as we go in our game. But it also happens culturally. There was a strong counterattack to this golden age we see in Socrates. The Greek tradition was replaced with the Latin tradition. Understanding and knowledge was replaced by opinions and faith, obedience to authorities, and their ignorance. Began the Dark Ages. Exactly right, yes. Looking to external authorities instead of developing their own virtues, their own wisdom, their own courage, their own temperance, their own justice. Yes. And even our governments are still playing out the implications of what happens if you don't have philosophy that Socrates told us 2,000 years ago. What did he say? Hey, those who don't pursue philosophy will be engaged in war, civil discord, and battles because they're serving their body. And they don't think that the highest desire is wisdom. They don't even think there is such a thing because of their tradition. So what we play out internally in our quest for the virtues has played out dramatically in human history. That's why we want to do a dialectic. We take all of these things that we've been learning and we do a dialectic about philosophy. So we say, if true philosophy exists, that's SAA, but the dialectic has two parts. SAB. Oh, okay, cool. SAB, if philosophy does not. So, by exists, we mean exists in the realm of pure being. Exists eternally, immortally. The word for that is metaphysics, prior to physics. Okay? And if philosophy doesn't exist. So you have 4 categories in each. Self to self. So the subject is philosophy, that's the self of the dialectic. So what can you say about the subject itself? If philosophy exists, then it's eternal. It involves knowledge. It is truth, and so on. Everything you learn as we go through the Phaedo, and if you go through the we've done the opening and the first hypothesis so far on the Parmenides. Go through that too. We're going to go back to it after the Phaedo. But all of the texts we read, we're going to learn more about these, about philosophy. You add it in here. What can you say about philosophy itself? But also you have to jump over to, it's like there's a Marvel series. What if Spider-Man was never bitten by the spider? So that's the what if it didn't exist. What can you say self to self about the subject in relation to itself? So you create a what if universe. What if Spider-Man existed? What if Spider-Man was never bitten by the spider? So you can actually use that to mythologize your dialectic. So after you do this dialectic, you can put characters on it, make it a story, or a song if you're a musician, or a painting if you're depending on what your art is. But that's what mythology is. Personification and representation of this. So if philosophy does not exist, then what is philosophy? Opinions. What else would you say? Opinions. It's not true, so it's fundamentally it's not truth. What else would you say? It's opinions. It's it's not absolute. It's many different opinions. Kant's opinions, Hegel's opinion. Next category is self to another. So pick another term to rub it against. Like we talked about rubbing 2 sticks together. Welcome back. If true philosophy exists, how does it relate to, let's say, us? Let's pick us. So we pick another. So the O, self is philosophy. O is, so dialectic has 2. You have 2 things you focus on. Let's say us. How does it relate to us? If philosophy exists, it's the logos. It can create, or it can we can share in it. Oh wait, no, that's us back to it. How does it relate to us? It can inspire us. Hey, maybe it guides us. And equally so, you jump into your other Word document where you're doing the what if Spider-Man was never bitten by the spider. How does it relate to us? It, authority, faith, It gives us advice, maybe. Then, third category, others to others. To us, having been affected by philosophy, how do we relate to each other? Well, Socrates just said, hey, we have to believe that doctrine that he just gave us, repeat it, test it, verify it through our dianoia and our nous, which is Greek for understanding with a capital U and knowing with a capital N, capital K. That's how we relate to each other. Oh, also we have dialectic. That's how we relate to each other. We are friendly. We support each other. We can benefit each other through philosophy. Okay, and then jump over the other document. How do we relate to each other if philosophy doesn't exist? That's what we got from the text. So we can, what we should be doing this dialectic on is using the text if we can, as much as possible. So we are filled with passions, desires and fears, illusions and foolishness. Okay, so because we want to use the text, let's make some space first of all. Let's go back to here, self to others, and use the text. What did he say? He said, how does philosophy relate to us if it doesn't exist, if it's not true philosophy? Keeps us busy in numberless ways. Need for sustenance, disease impedes us. Fills us with passions, desires, fears, illusions, foolishness. So let's add that in. Let's go a different color. So we're doing it. We're practicing or demonstrating what we're defining. So it keeps us busy. Distracted from philosophy, from true philosophy. And our true goals and desires. It fills us with fears, illusion, fills us with passions, desires, foolishness. What else? Fears, illusions, and so on. I encourage you to do this on your own as well. Okay, and then next one is having been affected, how do we relate to each other? So that's other, that's other, goes on. So you notice that there's an unfolding, and this is the topic of today's conversation. Just write it down for the title. Unfolding. If there is true philosophy and a true logos, that is the cause of and paradigm of all of our reality, and it comes from the self, there is an unfolding through the logos. It rolls over, it's rational, it's understandable, and because we can turn around, we can take that unfolding and turn it around and return. That's the emanation and reversion, the unfolding and the returning. In the chat, it was like, welcome home. That's the essence of philosophy. You're returning home, right? So that's turning about from your physical senses, turns you around back to your origin, right? And there's a quote in philosophy, everything is from self, in self, and returning to self, which is another triad, which is fun. So we can see, well, if the structure of the logos is the dialectic, then can we see this unfolding in the dialectic too? Yes, we can. Why? Well, look at this. You start off with the subject. What can you say about the subject in relation to itself? Self to self. Then this self that you've just defined Another word for this category, this is definition, by the way. So you can have one way of understanding the dialectic is SOs, you call it. Another one is DDAS, definition, demonstration, division, analysis, synthesis. Okay, so another way of saying what can you say about the self itself is definition. How do you define it? Okay, then you take this self and that rolls over into here. See, it's unfolding. Okay, how does that self that you've just defined demonstrate? The definition, demonstration. How does it function to another? How does it demonstrate itself? Keeps us distracted from true philosophy and our true goals, fills us with passions, desires, foolishness. Okay, so you've just defined what we are like. So you take that and it rolls over to the next category. So now we're here. How do we, having been affected in this way, roll over to how do we affect others? How do we relate to other human beings? And that brings in what we just read about in this text here. Keeps us in war and civil discord and battles, because all wars arise from the acquisition of possessions for the sake of the body. Makes sense. So it follows a reasoning. It has to make sense, but it also has to roll over. It has to follow. There's no tangents or non sequiturs. From the chat, I can understand the idea of there being a conscious God teaching us when this logos understanding grows within us, as it does seem a divine inspiration or conscious teacher. Ooh. Add that to your question. Add that to, actually, if you can, use that insight or that theory. You can either take it as a theory in your FSAC, which is in your inventory. You can use it to hone your question in your question sack, which is in your inventory as the true paradigm of the adventurer. Or you can do this. Make it into a dialectic. What can you say about this inspiration or the logos? Or, so it'd be like, what can you say? Self itself. How does it function to another? So maybe yourself and other could be logos and inspiration, or how does the logos relate to the divine? So that can be your two terms, logos and divine. So the more you understand about both, the better you can improve your dialectic. So here in this one, the S is philosophy, and the other is us, philosophers, or people, say people. You don't have to do one. You could do one on logos, and you could use your idea of consciousness as your other term. This is the exercise of philosophy that specifically, in order to do this, by the way, you're probably not going to be paying much attention to eating Fruit Loops. You're not going to be wondering about some pretty girl. You're not going to be afraid of some physical thing. What you're going to be doing, if you do this, if you take your question and apply the dialectic to it, you're going to be collecting all of your attention from all of those many things, all those many distractions, many desires, many passions, many illusions, many fears. You're going to collect yourself away from that to be engaged in the dialectic. You are collecting yourself from all parts, collecting yourself together away from your physical body, which is the exercise of philosophy. So your previous question, how do we do this? How do we turn away to see the self itself? Well, here's a possible answer. Test it out. And it's fun. And if you're interested in video game making or film making or music, use it as a model to mythologize. So take all of these ideas. Okay, so philosophy becomes Iron Man. So over here we've got knowledge, truth, logos. That becomes Captain America. Truth is represented by Who represents truth? Actually, Captain America, probably truth. Logos. That's... Oh, who's the smartest? Maybe Eric Banner. No, not Eric Banner. Who's the Hulk when he's not the Hulk? What's he called? Because he's the smartest Avenger, right? When he's a scientist. You know? Oh, okay. What's a mythological universe you're more familiar with? By the way, you could create your own, or you could use someone else that already exists. Socrates is doing both. He's using Aesop and he's making his own. But is there a mythological universe that you are familiar with? World of Warcraft. Right. That's so. Right. So you could represent this by. Oh God, it's been so long. The elves represent truth. So you could use an elf, or the elves, or a high elf, or whoever the high elf is. The logos could be represented by the best dwarf. I don't actually know the lore very well, but you get the idea. And so in each of these acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, you would say, oh, how do the elves who represent truth relate to the humans who represent knowledge? And the, who's an eternal race? The dryads, maybe. How do the dryads, so you can have a story representing how the elves relate to the dryads and how the humans relate, to mythologize in story how eternity relates to knowledge, relates to truth, all as a way of understanding the primary character in your story. Who would be the primary character in World of Warcraft for you? Or a guy that you like the most or understand the most? The complex question. Isn't there a guy like too many? Pick one. Is it Arthur? Who's that? The guy that becomes... Ah, okay. Elon. Okay, so your subject, for me it's philosophy, would be represented by Turalyon. And that's how I create my story. Oh, he becomes the Lich... Arthas becomes the Lich King. Cool. So, actually, that's interesting. So if I use Arthas here, that would be my first dialectic. And then over here, I also have to do if Arthas doesn't exist. So when he becomes the corrupted, when he becomes the Lich King, the story opinions would be the orcs. Manyness would represent the trolls or whatever. So I'd create this universe as a way of representing in mythology what I'm learning in truth. Because this is truth. This is what we're here to do as human beings, to find the truth about these things, which is also a preparation for the divine self to allow us into the higher dimension. Like the two-dimensional reflection in our mirror enters the three-dimensional world kind of thing. So that's what Socrates is saying we should do. He says that's what we should do in the time before the sun sets. So that's adding mythology to your dialectic. And it's fun. And you can share it with your friends. So, we are seeing that in this dialectic structure, there's an unfolding. So now we ask the question, okay, if philosophy doesn't exist, what is it? It's opinions. It's not absolute. It's many theories. It's manyness. Okay, how does it relate to us? It keeps us distracted from true philosophy, from our true goals. It fills us with passions, desires. And we use the text. We use the key terms in the text. That's part of it. War, civil discord, and battles. That's how we relate to each other. So add that in. War, civil discord, battles. Also, we can reflect what we added in this side, in SAA, into this. Dialectic and friendly. What's the opposite of that? Debate. Debate. Debate who's right, who's wrong, whose theories are right, whose opinions are right. What's the opposite of friendly? Mean. Or competitive, or just mean is good. What's the opposite of support? We not supporting someone. What are you doing? Harming? We harm. We're not benefiting. We're harming, aren't we? Hurting. We're corrupting. We're corrupting. See? So as you do this, you might recognize, corrupting. I can use that as one of the key elements in my mythology. Because what happens to Arthas, he gets corrupted to become the Lich King. So this corruption theme could be a central theme. And that's what we do. Because this is definition. This is demonstration. How does it demonstrate itself? This is division. How does it divide up? He didn't uphold the lessons of Arthur's paladin training, and then he got corrupted. God damn it. Right. So the difference is you're adding to your story what you learned through reading the Phaedo, engaged in the Logos of Plato. You're adding this dialectic first, and then you're creating the mythology. So you can use those ideas that already exist if you want. So you're dividing it up into parts. But what's interesting about division, you have all these divided elements. One of them is going to stand out as most significant. Corrupting. So in our dialectic, the fourth term is other back to self. So see, we've only got two terms. It's so simple. What's the most simple way of understanding one idea? Two ideas. You can't just use, it's like saying you can't define something with just the word itself. You can't use the name in the dictionary definition. Doesn't make sense. So the simplest way of understanding something is with two ideas. That's dialectic. What's the most simple, what is, in terms of thought, in terms of principles that exist in reality, what is the most primary ideas that allow for two-ness? Self and others. For there to be two things, there's you and there's what's not you. That's the most fundamental way of using reason. And the most fundamental metaphysical principles. For there to be anything, if everything was the same, or in philosophy we say the self, for there to be a generation and unfolding into different dimensions, different realities, that self has to become other. It has to be for there to be two things. So same and other, or self and other, are the two most primary principles of reality itself. And we use them to understand fully the ideas that we're interested in philosophy. Why? Self itself, self to the other to the other to self. These are the only four ways of arranging these two ideas. That's the dialectic. Let's keep going with that in mind. So the final thing is, having been affected in this way, so keep in mind it rolls on. There's a logical reasoning. There's an unfolding to your arguments. There's an unfolding to what Socrates is doing, just as there is an unfolding to the dialectic. And we're interested in that because we are curious. Why is Socrates' logos unfolding in the way it is? Because he's already defined philosophy. He's already defined why it's good to live according to philosophy, what our true purpose is in life, and how it's going to help us in our next life, and why we're not going to fear death. He's also helped us out by defining what actual death is and what it means to liberate yourself. He's done it. He's given a defense of philosophy and why we should live that way. But our question is, why does it unfold the way it does? Why did he change from philosophy to philophronesis? And he's also unfolding into the virtues. That's a puzzle. If you know the pattern, you can see the puzzles. The author is giving you puzzles to solve. Like a good film director, I say Christopher Nolan. If you watch Christopher Nolan's movies, like, I don't know, what's one to pick up on? Inception. If you realize that he outlines the structure of the universe. We are dream people. There's an architect who creates the dreams, and then there's a dreamer. He gives you all the rules so that he can break them, or he can show slight deviations to the pattern. So you go, hang on a second, that dream totem, he's letting somebody else hold it. He said you can't let anybody else touch your dream totem. Oh, something's going on here. These are the clues that the author gives you to realize there's a question here. Just like a video game. You're playing Resident Evil, you're walking down and there are all these paintings of people. Then all of a sudden there's one spot that's missing a painting. Uh-oh, something happened here. There's something to investigate. Or maybe all of the paintings have a gem in each eye, but then there's one missing. There's a puzzle here. I have to find that missing gem and put it there. That's the logos. That's our life. As you go in life, you'll realize something stands out. There's a puzzle you have to solve, and that's why you're here. There's something you have to learn, or there's something you have to purify yourself from, and do both. But how will you recognize it? Because a lot of people live their whole lives and they never question their opinions and their beliefs, and they stay in their old prejudices that they got from their parents and their parents got from their parents and all the way back to the cave. That's called in mythology a family curse. They don't recognize that they're living out their prejudices. Hey, everybody, like famously, I'm not racist, but, and then they'll say the most racist thing. They don't realize they're stuck in ignorance. Why? Because they haven't seen the pattern to notice the deviations. That's what we're doing here. We're learning the pattern of reality, the logos, and the structure of that pattern, the dialectic, by separating ourselves from our senses and applying ourselves to a text which participates, shares in the logos, so we can share in it too. From the chat, puzzle for me is probably what makes my left side and others' right side on your writing. What gave me the fire in my heart and others not? Ah, yes. That's a question. How come some people can get awakened to the logos, to the quest for truth, and others are content? Is that something to do with reincarnation? Can we all get woken up? Do we need an inciting event? You realize this is another dimension to your original question, which is good. In fact, in the Parmenides, when Socrates says, hey, can you give me an example of the dialectic Parmenides? Socrates is just a kid. But can you do it not on beauty or justice, but do it on the self? He picks the highest term.
Sneaky little hobbitses.
Very sneaky. Parmenides says, I'm only going to do it because we're philosophers here. We're of selves. When we're around other people who are not into philosophy, they get mad. And Zeno, his student, says, yes, Socrates, it's actually very improper to ask an old man to talk about the logos in the presence of the many, because they don't like, people get triggered by ideas that challenge their fundamental. Exactly. They get told to shut up. In fact, you could even say, well, maybe there's even, you could see the logos in their reactions. Is there a ladder? You get ignored. You get laughed at. You get told to shut up. You get threatened. You get kicked out of the group. And you end up like Socrates, killed by the state. Is that a hierarchical order that represents the logos? That's a question that I have. But yeah. In fact, yeah, and we saw in these quotes that often In fact, the biggest puzzle comes from the opinions of the many that there is no point in this because, what's the quote from Parmenides of the greatest puzzle? Here we go. The following is the greatest puzzle. Even if following this proof through many elaborate details from one practiced and experienced, and with natural talent, even then, he who contends that the idea selves are unknowable may still remain unpersuaded. This is not exactly what we were talking about, how the many are often opposed to this, but it's that from the many we can get this idea that we can't know true being. And even if we engage in philosophy, we'll still remain unpersuaded. There has to be some way of purifying ourselves from the false beliefs from the many. It's a good question. Why some and not others? So, looking at the unfolding, self to self, that self rolls over to the next category, self to another. For it's us in this dialectic. Then other to another. So this other unfolds. And then this other unfolds to the next category. This one goes here. Oops. And this one unfolds here to here. Having been affected by non-philosophy in this way, how do we relate back to philosophy? How do these relate back? So this is the reversion or the returning or the ousia, returning back, because this takes you all the way back to the start. How do you relate back to the idea at the start? So this comes here all the way back to here again. How do we relate back to philosophy in this way? A lot of people hate philosophy. We tell people to shut up. Tell philosophers to shut up, as you said in the chat. This is how we relate to philosophy. So what that means is we can have, oh, by the way, we have to do it in the other as well. So we have to do it in the positive side. If philosophy exists, what can you say about it? Eternal, knowable, true. How does it relate to us? Through logos, inspiration, guiding us, providence. Throw providence in there. How do we relate to others? We believe this doctrine, we repeat this text, we verify through ourselves, through understanding and nous. We relate to each other through friendly dialectic and supporting and benefit. And then finally, after having that support, having this conversation, right, it becomes anti-philosophy and takes hold. Yes. So which of these three categories would you put that? Dictates people. Maybe this one? How this so you would say maybe this is anti-philosophy. Well, that's what you could say about it itself, anti-philosophy. How does it function towards others? It dictates others. Takes hold. How do those people who have been dictated to as a belief system? Yes, belief system. So how do those with that belief system, how do they relate to other people? Well, yeah, they tell them to shut up if you don't agree with their belief system, right? That's one way. They say, shut up. And then having been told to shut up, how do those people relate back to the philosophy? Maybe they end up hating philosophy. Fearing philosophy. They join this group, they join this belief system, and they become themselves. They continue the cycle and they tell other people to shut up. People who are not in the group, people who stand out from the group. They become self-policing sheep. So what's great about the dialectic is we face these problems, but now we can understand where they come from. Yeah, conformity culture, yes. Conformity. Conform to anti-philosophy. That's how others, having been affected here, relate back to the start. Relate back to the start. That's the dialectic. You can see and understand problems. You can recognize people. But also, you know how to relate to people. Oh, really? You're over here. Well, what I can do is jump over to my positive side, because this is what I would, if I wanted to benefit you, I can't play your game. I have to play this game. I'd have to do dialectic with you. I'd have to support you. I'd have to repeat what I've learned. Maybe I can recognize where you're at and I can ask you some questions that can lead you up to recognize the cause of what you're doing. So we can see there's a causal progression. Hey, what's the cause of being told to shut up? Oh, easy. This is caused by that. Because people who relate to other people and tell them to shut up are distracted from true philosophy. They're filled with their passions and desires and their foolishness and illusions. That's what it's caused. Well, what's the cause of that? Next level up. So it reflects the dimensions of reality. The dimensions of reality are reflected in the dialectic. Because a higher, like we are the cause of our reflection, 3D into 2D, but also we have our cause in the realm of being from the 4D. And that has a cause from the self. So we can recognize that this can be applied to anything, including dimensions, but also causes. So hey, why am I told to shut up? Well, let's go right down to the bottom. Conformity. Why are there some people who are conformed to anti-philosophy? Oh, because they were told to shut up by others. Why were they told to shut up by others? Oh, because next level up. Because others were distracted from true philosophy and they were filled with their passions and desires, foolishness and illusions and fears. Their fears. Why were they filled with those sort of fears? Oh, because their understanding of philosophy was opinions and many in anti-philosophy. So we can understand our problems by going up through the levels of causes. But then we also have to mythologize it, create your own fan fiction of World of Warcraft. There are many of them already. So if philosophy does exist, we say this. How does it relate to others? Self to others. Logos, inspire, guides, providence. Okay, so this rolls over to the next one. So it's an unfolding and a reversion. Notice that when we reverted, we were reverting on our causes. That's philosophy. Philosophy is a reversion through the logos via the dialectic structure on our causes. What's the cause of my physical world? The realm of being. What's the cause of the realm of being? The oneself, and so on. But we have to finish it off in saying, okay, how do we relate to others if philosophy does exist? Friendly, dialectic, supporting, beneficial, through understanding, through repeating our texts. But then how do we relate back to philosophy having been affected in this way? We love philosophy. We're inspired to share in philosophy. Modern society also causes a lot of distraction, yes. It doesn't give a lot of time to allow people to introspect and think, absolutely. People are kept running all the time, not time to stop and enjoy the roses, absolutely. Which is very interesting because that's what we're told here. If philosophy doesn't exist, and we can't recognize as a true being outside of our body, self by self of the soul, we live this kind of life, says Socrates in the Phaedo. That we are running around in this way, and we have no leisure for philosophy. Absolutely. So that was another handy refresher on the dialectic, but now we want to apply it. So he's just outlined all of those things, what philosophy is and what it isn't. He outlined how it relates to us and how it relates to us if we don't have philosophy. All that. How we relate to each other, and then how do we relate to back to philosophy? We are purified, and we practice death. And how do we do it? How do we relate back to philosophy? The dialectic. What we're doing. So he's done it. He's given enough material to, so you can see that behind his thinking, he has this structure. He's flowing from it. It's his. That's what we do when we make our dialectic. We make it our own. So he's given a defense of philosophy. And he's also given us what we need to do it ourselves. He's helped us out. He's giving us the material that we can apply our dialectic to, so we can make philosophy our own, so we can pull this stunt off. So it should be the end of the book. Yeah, it's an amazing logic breakdown. And the significance of what makes this is very logical. In fact, it's the highest use of logic, but it's not just logical, but it also opens us up for direct experiences, so it's mystical too. That's the Logos. Logos has both. In fact, in the text, there's a fantastic saying that he says, here we go. Many are the thyrsus bearers. That's a staff, if you're interested in Warcraft. Many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. He's saying, hey, this is a kind of, to be able to pull this stunt off is a kind of rite of initiation. And if when you arrive in the afterlife, if you haven't accomplished this and you're uninitiated, you will lie outstretched in a barbarous bog, whereas those who have been purified and perfected will dwell with the gods. For those concerned with the mysteries, it's a mystery tradition. Now, we're not keeping it a mystery anymore. Humanity doesn't have time. We have enough technology and resources, and the pathologos, or the ignorance of our leaders, are such that we have exactly what we need to destroy our whole species. So we can't keep it a mystery tradition anymore. To bring philosophy into the light, we have to awaken humanity and ourselves to philosophy. But back then it was a mystery tradition. I didn't have nuclear bombs, as many as we have now. But there's a quote, many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. But those who are those who practice philosophy correctly. And he says, and therefore, I have left, this is the reason why I left nothing unfinished. I'm even making mythologies, making poems and songs. I've done everything, accomplished everything in the right way. For a few hours, I will be there with the gods, God willing. This is my defense, that I am leaving you and my masters here without being disturbed, perturbed, nor without any complaint, by being reasonably led to believe that there, no less than here, I shall find good masters as well as good friends. But the many do not trust in this. Question in chat. Not everyone gets it. If my defense is more persuasive to you than the Athenian jury who has sentenced me to death, then it will go well. Okay, that's the end of his defense. So amazing. Amazing. Like, it's there in black and white. We're so lucky. Many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. That's a bumper sticker. Many claim to be mystics, but few are true philosophers. Equally so, from our dialectic, we can apply it to this. Hey, many people are in this. If philosophy doesn't exist, they're interested in opinions and theories. Hey, philosophy means one of many. Hey, Plato's philosophy, that's just his opinion. We've got Kant's philosophy and Hegel's philosophy and my mum's philosophy, and it doesn't philosophy mean just whatever you believe in? Nope. That's if philosophy doesn't exist. Opinions. Not absolute. Many. It's in fact the anti-philosophy. Many have the staff of that, but few are the true wizards. Many are the staff bearers, few are the inspired mystics.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Okay, so fantastic, but there are some puzzles because something doesn't quite fit. Why, after giving the correct life's work and nature of philosophy and purification, did he go on to talk about this thing called phronesis? He mentioned riddles. That could be a clue. Maybe he's giving us a riddle to solve. Okay, let's go back. He goes on to, hey, sound-mindedness, temperance, and courage. Some people we call brave, but do they think death is the greatest bad? It's not evil, it's bad. And are they only brave and accept death, accept what is considered the greatest bad because they're afraid of greater calamities? They think something worse will happen if they don't accept death? And they have no choice, it's out of necessity. Except for the philosophers, of course, because to have justice is to be always doing your only function at all times. Therefore, courage is not fear, and it's not out of necessity. It's because you want the logos. That's having sound-mindedness, to have all of your parts of your soul seeking the same thing, the logos. Whereas some people accept death not because they want death, because the logo says it's how you get phronesis and knowledge and truth. So it's the opposite. Equally so, some people are not pushed around by some desires because they'd rather have other desires. Hey, I'm not going to eat all the cakes because I want all the women's. I'm not going to spend all my money on gambling because I'm going to spend it all on booze. That's not really being well ordered. That's not really sound-mindedness or temperance. So that's what he just went into after doing his giving us the yoga or the defense of philosophy. So why does he start talking about the virtues? Okay. So sound-mindedness is equally like this. You fear being deprived of some other pleasures which you desire. So you keep away from some for the sake of being mastered by others. So it's really a lack of discipline to master certain pleasures in order to be mastered by others. Kind of poetic language. They have been made mindful by a lack of discipline. It's not true for Phronesis. O blessed Simmias, that is truly not that which is the right exchange for virtue. Okay, so not only are we supposed to be doing what he's saying here, we're supposed to be developing this through a practice, a discipline, mastering those pleasures. All of those things that he's been saying. We've got in our dialectic that we've done. How do we relate to philosophy? Dialectic, dianoia, separating from the senses. All of those things go in here. Understanding. So let's understanding. Dianoia. Separate from our body. Well, we call that purification, don't we? Or death. All those things he said. Not only do we do that, but we also have to be developing the virtues. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rolled on like this here. He is currently at some certain level of the dialectic. He has defined. So let's. So he's let's get a highlighter. So he's defined it. He said how he's either here or here or here or here. He's at some level currently, but he's rolling on to the virtues. Maybe it's here. Maybe he's talked about what philosophy is itself, talked about it separating from the body, whatever, but then how it affects us. And now he's onto this stage. He's dividing it up to a new idea of virtue. I don't know. I can't see it yet. But there's some reason for him to continue talking, meaning he's rolling on. And he's rolled on into the virtues. So even if we can't see it, we can recognize he's speaking through the dialectic and for a reason. So, question, why did he bring up Phronesis? Why is he rolling on to Phronesis? Another question is, what color? Question 2. Why is Soc rolling on to talk about the virtues? And also, adding to our question, polishing it up, leveling up our question, he also talked about what the virtues are not, or the anti-virtues, or not virtues. He talked about what courage is not. He talked about what temperance is not. Temperance is not mastering your desire for this just so you can be mastered by that desire. Courage is not accepting death because you're afraid of something worse happening. You want death because you understand it, the logos, and you desire it, and you've been practicing it. So what does that mean? That means if he's also giving the anti-logos, or the anti-virtues, or the not virtues, that means he's doing a dialectic. He's giving us both sides of the equation, meaning he's somewhere on this map. So you've got if philosophy is and if it isn't, you've got to do one and then the other. You can talk about knowledge and truth as well as opinions and ignorance. Sad ignorance in there. The ignorance. So if he's doing both, we can recognize in the structure, even if we don't see it yet, there's a puzzle here. He's doing it, giving us both. Why is he rolling on to talk about the virtues and the anti-virtues? And also, if he's just talked about 2, we can fill in the rest of the equation. Hey, if there is a way of doing sound-mindedness, but in the wrong way, well, what's the right way? Well, the right way is to align every part of your soul so that every part, your biggest part of the body, what you seek for yourself, is what wisdom wants, the logos. What you do outwardly, the heart, what you want honor for, what you want truth for, what you want to be well respected for, what you want to achieve outwardly in the world, logos too. What are you reasoning about? Hey, do you want to defend your family's opinions? Do you want to defend the religion you grew up in? Do you want to defend the cultural myths and beliefs? Or do you want the logos? So we could do that. We could say, hey, there are some people who attain the logos, but not just the logos, but also being. Cool. If there are people who can attain some mastery of their desires, not through the logos and being, not through the logos, that's anti-sound-mindedness. If there are some people who can attain courage through fear and ignorance, then there must be true courage, which is through the opposite, through not fear, but desire. Or rather, not desiring, but for sound-mindedness, not by desiring things other in the anti-philosophy category, but the logos. Truth and being, and the logos and dialectic. Therefore, we could say, well, if he might be leaving us something to do. So what are the 2 other virtues? Justice and wisdom. Let's do wisdom. Okay, is there a way of attaining wisdom? Through not the logos? That's tricky because wisdom is the logos. I guess we could say those who have enlightenment through other traditions that don't go through the logos. They reach being through drugs or chanting or breath control or meditation or devotion or prayer or something like that. So not through logos. Maybe. Or maybe the other side. Maybe they study the logos and they don't apply it. They don't exercise themselves in the dialectic. So that's our own exercise. Okay, let's keep going. Justice. To do your intended function and only that. Well, maybe you actually live a simple life. You're not pursuing crazy desires. Have sound-mindedness. You seek truth in what you do, but you're a simple person. You haven't mastered the logos. You still want to learn and become better. So you spend your lifetime learning and understanding, and you also, so that's your private life and your public life. So justice is doing your intended function and only that in your private and public life, in all things. So hey, maybe you relate to other people in a good way too. Welcome back. You help other people learn. But you haven't got there. You've got there through everyone in my family is a teacher. Oh, my culture is being nice to people. Oh, I'm from a religious tradition that really values learning and understanding. I know some like that. It's not mine, but I know people whose family really encourage learning. Or really encourage, and they think, oh, the best thing is to be a teacher. To be a doctor, something like that. To benefit people. So be a doctor, be smart and be a doctor. So maybe you could do your own, what would be anti-wisdom and anti-justice. So you have a kind of, you act in a similar way. Like people have the appearance or have it's kind of like half. They have half of what sound-mindedness is. They're not mastered by some desires. They have half of what courage is. They end up doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. That's it. Doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Reasons, another word for reasons, logos. So they don't have it fully. So, wisdom. They pursue philosophy. Why? Because they want to look cool. I don't know. Because they want to be the authority. Because they want to, I don't know, for the wrong reasons. Not for the reasons we've outlined just now. What are the reasons? Truth and phronesis. Truth, being. To understand and directly apprehend through ousia, the ousia of each of the beings. Justice, beauty, goodness, health, excellence, greatness, all of those things that have that pure existence and being. But you want to do that so you could be the lead spiritualist at your Zen center, or the head guru at your ashram. Why? Well, if you're the head guru at the ashram, sometimes I've heard of these groups where they can sleep with all of the women's. Hey, everyone's wife has to visit the guru's tent every evening. You heard about this? Have you heard about this? So you're doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. You're seeking enlightenment of being, but for the wrong reasons. You've heard about this. Hey, justice, doing your intended function at all times. Hey, those cult leaders are like that. They never give up on their cult stuff. They're always talking about it. Hey, should you have your own private jet? Well, you see, in the Bible, it says that blah, 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 blah. And Jesus says it's important to have your own personal wealth because, you see, the Bible says, so they never give up on it. They're always doing their thing. They're always focused on what they consider to be wisdom and enlightenment, even if it's justifying their planes. But the wrong reasons. They're not doing it because they want to. They realize if they keep up on this I'm a wise pastor crap, they can have as many planes as they want and, you know, have the best food. All of the things we have in our dialectic. Food, ornaments, clothes, shoes, sexual stimulation, honor, love of riches, love of the body. So, all of the things in the anti-logos. The triad, actually, what is it? Philosomatos, love of the body. Philokrimatos, love of riches. Or philotimos, love of honor. So, that's cool. So we could recognize the structure, which is what we're doing. That's part of the logos. So we could see, oh, he's done 2. We could recognize there's 4. So he's given us an activity. And that's called abduction. So revise. If you have levels, like if we think in metaphors, we have a lesser and a greater level. If you go from the lesser, like physics, you look at the things in the lesser realm and you infer or induce a theory. This is the theory that's greater, has a greater existence. This is the theory that it can explain all my lesser observations. That's called induction. So you look for a theory. If you have the principles, you have everything you need in the principles and the details, and you go down to figure out what must have happened here, that's called deduction. If you have some of each, that's called induction. So you have some plus some equals, and you want to figure out here or here, that's abduction. Abduction. Not being stolen by an alien. Okay? So, how we see that play out in our text is we are learning about the spiritual, the mystical, the philosophical. So we're interested in the philosophical. That's the greater. And we get given metaphors or analogies in the lesser, right? So one way of doing that is if you say, look, okay, a king is to his people as a shepherd in the lesser is to his sheep, is to his tent that he sleeps in, is to his cart. You've been given these two. So you can learn, oh, really? So there are some things about this lesser that I can use to understand the higher. But also, I'm given some in this and some in that. Maybe you're also given, but you recognize, hang on a second, there's two that's missing. He's only given two. Therefore, there are two missing. I've got to do this. Equally so, he might say king is to people, is to his guards. So there might be something here that you're missing as well. So you have some from the top, some of the bottom. So you have to find, okay, what would be the equivalent of a guard for a shepherd? What would be equivalent of a tent for a king and a cart for a king? That's philosophical abduction. So why are we talking about that? Because we've been given 2 out of 4. So he's encouraging us to fill in what would be fake wisdom. Functioning in some ways like wisdom, but for the wrong reasons. I use this concept in chat with nature versus technology and real life psychology, in-game social psychology. I learn about the lesser and attribute it to the greater quite often. It's been really useful. Yes. Some might say that's how we think. Analogy is the basis of thought. But also, we talked about, well, hang on a second. There is an unfolding from more causal to its, this is the thing, but it has a function. So this causes the next level. And then having been affected, so what is it itself? Then how does it affect? What does it cause? Then having been affected, it then relates to other people. It has a causal effect. So you could say this is greater to lesser, and this becomes the greater to lesser. And this is, so you could say analogy is fundamental for unfolding. And our learning is taking what we know of the lesser and infer or create a hypothesis about the greater. So all thought could be said to follow analogy, and dialectic itself can follow analogy. Causal chain, unfolding and returning. Of course, leading to the big question, what is the first cause of all unfolding and all analogy? That might be the first hypothesis of the Parmenides. What is the one self? So, likewise, we did our little exercise here on what would be fake wisdom or fake justice. And I'm guessing it's to do some of the right things, but without the reasons, without the logos. And not have it completely. So you're lacking, you have some mastery of some desires, but you not have a complete mastery. So you lack excellence. So we can say, well, what makes the difference? Excellence. You could say maybe excellence, wanting it fully. What is the difference between true virtue and false. We could say excellence. Same color. Let's give it a different color. Maybe. Understanding, logos. I don't know. What else could you say? What makes a difference? If you want a great fun game to play, make a statement like bread is tasty. And play 20 questions of why. Why does it bread tasty? And then the answer to that, ask why again. Yes. Favorite, you'll end up really hard questions. Right. That's the philosophical game, by the way. Asking why is a question about the cause. Then what caused that? And then you end up with a question you can't answer right away. What do you do with that? Wonder. What do you do with that? Seek to answer it with excellence and seek to answer it through the logos. And seek to answer it with wonder. The state of mind. And we said, by the way, that's purifying a question. That means you by answering one question, you give birth to a deeper question. And to have a deeper question is to be on a quest. And by the way, if you can concentrate on a question for a sustained period of time without distractions, being separated from the body helps you to do that, by the way. Less distractions when you're out of the body. You go into a state called meditation. Sustained concentration goes into meditation. If you can sustain meditation, again, helps to be a philosopher practicing being dead and dying. You can join with your object of your question. That's called contemplation. So, while you were asking a question about bread, you engaged in that activity, but our question is bread something you can join with in contemplation? Or are you doing something that has the appearance of philosophy, but is kind of like what we talked about with the appearance of sound-mindedness and the appearance of courage? If so, what do you need to add to your question so that it can be something that you can contemplate and join with? We have some theories. Excellence. Do you have excellence in your question? Appears to be. One question births a new question, you seek to answer it, and you keep going. That seems to be excellence. So you have tick there. Is what your question is focused on, is it something of the logos? If it's not something of the logos, then it might not be something you can join with at the end of that journey. So instead of asking about bread, ask something about the self terms. What is justice itself? What is beauty itself? Because that's something that you can actually directly comprehend in contemplation. That's something in the realm of being. Are you wondering? Well, maybe half, right? Maybe half for excellence too. Like, it's an excellent game, but is it the highest question you can have? In which case, it's not excellence. What's the highest question? Maybe it's half for each of those, actually, because there is understanding in your answers. Maybe it's not a self a term. Let's add that. Has to be a self a term of being. Self a term or being. Are you doing it with true wonder? How much do you wonder about bread? I know you're using an example, but I'm also going to use an example too. So it sounds like you might be doing something that's very much like justice or very much like philosophy. Actually, we have two questions. What the heck is phronesis? So maybe you're doing something like justice or something like wisdom or maybe something like phronesis. I don't know. Is having all of these with excellence, with the logos, with the state of wonder, applied to the self-er terms as an activity, is that justice? Maybe. Could it be phronesis? I'm not sure. But it's a good example of what we're looking for here. Because these things were lacking in his examples of fake temperance and fake courage. Halfway there. Yeah, you're still accepting death, which is still courageous, but you don't have the reasons why. And it's not in a state of wonder, it's in a state of fear. And you're not doing it so you can enter the realm of being. And so therefore you don't have the excellence of courage. Let's take temperance as well. You're mastering some pleasures, but you're not doing it out of wonder, you're doing it out of desire for some pleasures. You're not desiring to be in that state of wisdom of being. You're not doing it because you understand the significance of temperance. You don't understand what temperance is. You just kind of fell into it. And therefore you don't have the excellence of temperance. So excellence seems to be the highest term. You need to be having these other things to give birth to excellence of the virtue. That's a really fantastic example that you shared in the chat. Thank you for that. Is that the highest term? Let's keep going. But yeah, I think it was a good example because you recognize that causal progression through logos or understanding with a sense of wonder via asking questions, all of the aspects we've seen. So you saw that in the game that you developed yourself. Only applying the logos to it, applying self-being to it in that state of mind of pure wonder, while applying excellence to each part is the only thing you're lacking, which is interesting because that's exactly what we're reading here. What do you reckon?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So, what is the right way? Oh, of course. And to do that game, you'd have to have some sort of control over your desires to be able to push the question and not get distracted by other things. Some sort of temperance. I just have some courage to hold on to your answers, and even if it feels like they're not the right ones, you'd have to have some reasoning and wisdom to a degree to do this game. And you're engaged in what we're supposed to be doing, the dialectic, so that's justice. So it does seem to be a great example of this reflection of the virtues. So, what is the right exchange for the virtues? What's the right way of using those virtues we just described? By exchanging pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains, fears for fears, and the greater for the less? Just like money? But but by that which is the only valid currency for which these things must be necessarily exchanged. Mindfulness. Oh. So to use this example, don't exchange the greater for the less. Don't apply these virtues and this dialectic reflection upon causes for bread. What should you use it for? Phronesis. What the heck does that mean?
What? 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 What?
What the heck does that mean?
What in the heck are we talking about here?
I don't know, Joe. But we're getting closer. I can feel it. And on the one hand, by means of this, and along with this, buy and sell all that which has being, virile, sound-mindedness, and righteousness, and collectively are the true virtues united with mindfulness, whether pleasures and fears and all other such like affections be added or subtracted. Okay, so we recognize that all of the virtues, you do that whether you have pleasures or fears. That's courage. Hold on to this truth in pleasure, pain, fear, or desire. On the other hand, very different is such a virtue that is exchanged for one without any mindfulness, by being that which is a certain outline of a shadow. That's our reflection into a lesser dimension. That's our shadow. Our distortion into a lower dimension. That's our reflection in the mirror. Shadow is another name for reflection. Similar principle. So you do it you exchange these virtues, these four virtues, without mindfulness, and you have its shadow. Just like we had a shadow of temperance and a shadow of courage, and we created our own shadow of wisdom. With the, someone, the drug addict maybe, who wants the experience of being, but without the logos, without excellence, really mastering being, without understanding the logos, without developing the logos and the dialectic, and using that as your method, without being in a state of wonder, but desiring because of the pleasure you get from experience. Hey, it's bliss. If pleasure is experienced when you join most fully with that which is good or beautiful, and beauty and good itself is in being, then it's by definition, it's the greatest, most blissful experience. That's why it's called bliss. That's why philosophy is called love of wisdom. Necessarily, you must fall in love with that which is the most beautiful and the most desiring and the most good. That leads into the question in the chat. What about inspiration? Why do I feel a recognition of the logos? Why am I inspired to it? Maybe it's part of the nature of being. This is actually talked about in the symposium, which we'll read one day. So also we did our own version of the shadow of justice, the cult leader. He's always doing his cult crap. He's always playing that grift. Talk about everything, and it's always like, oh yeah, the Bible says, or the great alien being says that I must. But he's doing it for the wrong reasons. He's not doing it with the excellence. What is the true excellence of being a guru? You've got a certain responsibility if you're the leader of a group. If you can see clearly and you can access being, if you have that higher state of being, then you have a higher responsibility to act in the most beneficial or artful way to those who are also learning. Right. Just so in the chat, the idea of you don't become a doctor so that you can enrich yourself. You always work for the benefit of your patients. You've got a responsibility that because you can see health more, you got to understand. So that's the idea of being or knowledge. You can understand logos, the nature of the body and the nature of illnesses. You got a responsibility to act more compassionately and more beneficially for those under your guidance as the true guru. So you're kind of, the shadow is the guru that keeps up the act at all times, because justice is doing your intended function at all times. But your intended function is a shadow. You're still doing it at all times, whether you're in public giving speeches or in private sleeping with the wives of all of the members. but without these elements. And we could probably add more. This is a hypothesis. This is our if, Zach, that we take with us. So we keep coming back. The more we learn, we can keep coming back to it and adding more to it. That's the dialectic. That's ousia, but also the dialectic. Why? Because the last term of the dialectic, that which is unfolded and unfolded and unfolded, reverts back to the start. And by the way, having gone through this exercise, you would have learned a lot more. You would have asked questions of people. You would have looked in parts of the text, like we've gone over the text over and over. Which means we actually did it. Look, we started with this. We went through and we realized, how do we relate back to philosophy? We conform to anti-philosophy. So there was something significant anti-philosophy that we related all the way back to the start, and we added it. See, it's in a different color. We added it back to the start. Which means we can do another dialectic on anti-philosophy. Start again. If philosophy doesn't exist, do one on anti-philosophy. We also talked about, well, there's one significant element, corruption. We could have focused on that and brought that around. Because that is a cool narrative function. Arthas gets corrupted, becomes the Lich King. So maybe that's the most significant thing that stands out for you. So you keep turning it back around and it informs the next evolution. It's an evolving. And as there are two elements, the self and the other, it's like a double helix. Turns about upon itself, but also raises upwards. This is the significant difference between the logos and just simply logic. Logic has a ceiling. It can't go out of the physical senses. That's why it's always inference. You never can prove your theories. Induction. But the logos has that evolving, takes you up to a higher dimension. That's the significance of awakening philosophy. It's an evolution through the highest use of reasoning. And I bet, like we talked about the double helix, I bet you'll see that if you're aware of it, I bet you'll be able to recognize that pattern playing out in all other areas. If it's something fundamental to the logos. Because if philosophy exists, it is eternal, it is knowable, it's truth. It also is the logos. It also guides, it also unfolds. That's pretty cool. So, in a similar way, we're taking this as an if of what makes the shadow not the shadow, or what the shadow is lacking. Like the two-dimensional shadow or reflection of ourselves lacks intelligence, lacks will, lacks understanding. Actually, that fits in here, right? Our mirror reflection lacks logos. It lacks a state of mind. It lacks an interest in the self of being. Interesting. What else does it lack? Will? Right, will. We can add will in there because the person who had courage did it because he had no choice. And the person who had fake temperance, fake sound-mindedness, did it because he was mastered by his other pleasures. So he didn't have will. Understanding. Kind of similar to logos, but a little bit different. From the chat, I think anti-philosophy is like society, is a reaction to the environment rather than philosophy which is controlled. For example, some people react on impulse rather than someone who has studied virtues and react in a controlled state. Right. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. Like, if we don't have this philosophy taught in school, how will we know how to control ourselves through temperance and not the shadow of our temperance? The best we say is, hey, control some desires so you can get other desires. Go to the gym so you can have lots of sex. Or save your money so you can spend it on a vacation. So society is just, generating automatic reactions. It serves the capitalism. Hey, Impulse buy, impulse buy. Why are the chocolates by the cash register? Impulse buy. What's marketing? Like the biggest industry in the world, I think, probably, maybe next to the war industry, is marketing. Propaganda. Hey, buy this product. They want you to be irrational. Right, so this is the significance of awakening philosophy into our world. Because humans will, if they don't have the true virtues, will play out the implications. So, and what are the implications? Oh, easy. I've done a dialectic on it. Let me pull it up. What are the implications? We'll be, as people, will be filled with foolishness and illusions and fears, tied to incorrect belief systems, and be dictated by them. Okay, what else follows? War, discord, battles, debates, mean, harm, hurting, corruption, telling philosophers to shut up. These are the implications that unfold from a society that does not have philosophy. That philosophy does not exist in the society. And if we're making a pitch to the education minister, hey, easy. Point out where we are. What does a doctor do? He points out where you are. If the health of your body does not exist, so he's in this category. This is what's happening. This is the cause of your illness. This is how it affects you. This is how you will live out your life. This is how you go to work, others to others. And this is how you relate to your illness again. What a doctor does, he does a dialectic. But he does it as a shadow of true philosophy because he doesn't have the logos and understanding of the dialectic. So he's pretty close. So what would you do? You have to give a dialectic on what if your health does exist. Hey, this is what health would be like, self to self. This is what a healthy body is itself. This is how a healthy body would relate to you, self to another. This is how you'd be able to other, relate to other people. This is how you relate to your wife if you had a healthy body. How you relate to your dog, how you relate to your job, how you live in the world. And finally, this is how you have to relate back to your healthy body. You'd have to keep eating the vitamins I prescribed. You have to keep taking care of yourself. So a doctor does both. But is the shadow of true virtue, true phronesis, maybe, I don't know what phronesis is, but true justice. Why? Because he lacks an understanding, lacks the logos, lacks the understanding of the dialectic. Add that in. He lacks excellence. But he's close. Right, so you can apply this to yourself and society. It's our human quest. So, he outlined this development of our logos, our dianoia. He gave us enough clues to recognize that it's the dialectic. He said it has the effect of separating the soul from the body. He pointed out this is the true path of philosophy. He pointed out that 2 thumbs up. He pointed out that the many don't recognize it. He pointed out this is what we really seek. But then he rolled over into the virtues. So there must be a reason. So simply this activity of the dialectic and separating the soul from the body, purifying ourselves from our problems and our ignorance, associating ourself with the body, not realizing that we are the immortal soul, and the other problems that flow on from this, the implications, how we relate to each other, how we relate back to philosophy and so on, how it relates to us, filled in with, we get driven out of our mind with bodily stuff, how it relates to others, war, discord. Hey, how do we relate back to philosophy? Well, maybe that's it. We have this shadow of the virtues. We have fake temperance. We have fake. By the way, let's add that in. So we're discovering as we go. So I'm going to just move this out of the way because that was your dialectic. I encourage you to make a document and fill out. And the thing is, you keep coming back to it. So it will evolve as your learning evolves. But we have how do we relate back to philosophy? What's philosophy? The development of the virtues. We have the shadow of, what was it? What did he call it? A shadow. It says certain outline. We have an outline or shadow of the virtues. We just getting the text. Cool. We have a shadow outline of a shadow. This is the significance of reading the text as accurately as you are able. Interpretation is adding what's not there or leaving out what is there. So, outline of a shadow. And possess neither soundness nor truth. The truth is truly a purification from all such things. And you're not sound-mindedness, righteousness, virility, and... Yes, that's the next part. Okay, so you possess neither soundness nor truth. Okay. Now, truth is something we've been hearing a lot about, but soundness is a new word. So, that could be for a reason, or it could be a puzzle that's sticking out to us. So let's find the word soundness. Yes, hi. Welcome to the stream. New people, we are on a hunt for the meaning of a certain word. No, it's not that one. Okay, so I think it means health, soundness. So I understand why the translator went with soundness. So if we exchange our virtues for something other than phronesis, which is mindfulness from our translator, but he highlights it to point out there's a puzzle here because mindfulness is meaningless unless we understand what it's referring to. Then we have a certain shadow and possess neither soundness or true health nor truth, and is fit for slaves, since the truth is truly a purification of all such things. So the truth that we're seeking as philosophers is a purification from all of these shadows or outlines of shadows of virtues. Sound-mindedness, so that's our temperance. Justice. Our translator likes righteousness, but the word is justice. Virility. And self-mindfulness is a certain rite of initiation, and it is likely that those established in these very mystic rites for us were not inferior persons. There's a certain rite of initiation that we're being led to here in the text. But they were speaking in riddles long ago, by saying that whoever should arrive in Hades uninitiated and unaccomplished at their purpose. So there's our idea of purpose. That's justice. Justice is a word that can refer to all of those virtues that we've been developing. Why? Well, because we saw that justice is the monad on top of the triad. So when we have sound-mindedness, courage, and wisdom as a triad here, justice results. So justice is all of them. So justice is used as a word that means doing your intended function, and only that at all times. Then you're living the just life. But it requires you to have developed these other virtues as well. Sound-mindedness, proper, not the shadow, which means aligning each part of your soul to seek what wisdom wants, being ruled by the smallest part, the reasoning part. Courage, which has your outward moving part of your soul, which is the medium, your heart. Seeking that even though you might not feel that it's the truth. Maybe there are pleasures and pains and fears and desires that motivate you. You hold on to what the Logos says is true. And finally, the virtue of reasoning is wisdom, which is to behold the Logos along with experiencing it. So it's understanding and this direct experience that we're calling truth, the truth, which Socrates is saying, hey, by the way, that the truth is a purification. You're purifying yourself from the ignorance that you are your body. And you get there, and you don't want to get there in the shadow. So he said, by the way, there's a shadow of all of these virtues. So you don't want to recognize that you're not the body through a near-death experience. That's one way of realizing that you are. That's one way, by the way. These near-death experiences or enlightenment experiences of pure being do have the effect of diminishing your problems on you. But give somebody a few weeks or a few months and they're right back to where they had their problems again. Like your friend who took acid at a rave and said, man, I know the meaning of life. But 2 weeks later, he's back to his old stuff again. Why? Because he did not get there through the Logos. He didn't develop a will and understanding and dialectic as the method. Therefore, he didn't achieve his state of wisdom with excellence. So, we applied that to wisdom and justice. Doing your intended function is justice. Let's jump back into the text. So, So there's a riddle here. He dropped the word riddle, so maybe this is a riddle for us. And maybe this riddle is our own rite of initiation, because those two words are right next to each other. Hypothesis. Take it with us as a theory. If you arrive in the afterlife uninitiated and unaccomplished in your purpose, there's the idea of justice, you will lie outstretched in a barbarous fog. Whereas one who arrives there having been purified and has perfected, there's our duad, purification from our ignorance, our problems, our false associations with the self. Hey, anyone tell you you're rubbish? Wrong. You got to get rid of that. How? The dialectic. That same tracing of the causes. Hey, this is the significance. How do you purify yourself? Well, Socrates is saying it's the separation of the soul from the body. You recognize you are not what you thought you were. So how can you be told you're rubbish or no good if you have a direct experience of your soul that is the divine? So if we go back to our self triad, so what's a triad we can use to understand the self? Well, there's the one self, which is the first cause of everything. That's the subject of the first hypothesis. In the playlist on the YouTube, we're doing the first hypothesis. That's what we did before we jumped into the Phaedo. We have self-being, which is pure mind or the divine, and the apprehension of that is truth. That's our state of mind, the highest state of mind. Hey, we all have states of mind. What's the highest? Some people call that enlightenment. And we have our self-logos. We have our reasoning. Okay, if that's the self a triad, we have problems that can knock you off this activity. People who are, as we looked at our dialectic on if philosophy doesn't exist, opinions, ignorance, fill us with desires, illusions, foolishness, belief systems that dictate us, that get us to fight each other and engage in wars and debate and act mean, and so on and so on. So what's the result of that? You end up with, if you believe those jokers, and by the way, we're human, so because we are human, we necessarily develop a false belief about ourself, our capacity to apprehend truth and reality, and our ability to function well. Understanding, so that we could also recognize that's our true nature, our power, and our activity. Our highest activity is the use of the self-logos through the dialectic. That's exactly what we've been learning philosophy is. So hey, you grow up, because we're humans and we have to get a problem, otherwise why would we be here? We have to purify ourselves from something. It's going to be someone that says, hey, your nature is wrong. You have original sin. You are a bad influence. You're a piece of shit. Something along those lines. You have to. Everyone does. Everyone brought up in a family, in a culture, in a society. You can't apprehend the divine, or the world is just physical, or your mind is inadequate. You never seek the truth. You're a liar. Something about your state of mind, or your ability to function through the self-logos. Your understanding is dumb. You can't reach your goals. Your self-logos is limited. Your most meaningful goals are not attainable to you. Everyone gets something of that, and it's always going to be in one of those categories or all of them. Okay? So how do you purify yourself? Well, you can get there by simply separating yourself from the body, and you realize, well, of course this can't be bad because I'm experiencing that I'm the soul. And by the way, in that recognition of being, I recognize this is the overflowing of the self. So the self is not a bad influence. I'm not a piece of shit. I'm great. I can't believe I once thought that about myself. Oh, by the way, this experience is understandable. And I recognize it. There's something about this experience that has an understandable quality, and I recognize it. So this is the effect of the separation from the soul from the body. But Socrates just went out of his way to say, hey, I've just explained that, but now I'm going to roll on to this talking about what the virtues are not. Why? He is giving us a riddle. He's giving us something to solve. Why? Because that's what it means to be beneficial. If he was just giving us the answers, that would be belief. Where does that fit? If philosophy doesn't exist, we end up being dictated by a belief system. Excuse my handwriting. Let's make it a bit neater. This is something that we developed together in the chat today. So this is if philosophy doesn't exist, it's opinions, it's ignorance, it's many, it's anti-philosophy. How does it, that's self to self? How does it relate to us, self to others? Belief systems that dictate to us. That's what we had, just making it clearer. Okay, so if he was dictating to us and he's just telling us, it would be a simple belief system. He doesn't want to do that because that's what philosophy isn't. And he is a true philosopher.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Like Gandalf. He wants us to share in, so he's giving us a riddle. So what's the riddle? Hey, by the way, I've just told you that you can purify yourself from your problems and experience truth. And that gets rid of not only do you experience truth, but you also troubles. It also, let's get the text. Here we go, let's get it. The person who most perfectly approaches each being with self-understanding, there's our logos, without associating their sight with their understanding, nor dragging any other sense perception, not one with their reasoning, but uses understanding that purifies self by self, dialectic, and tries to track down each of the beings, apply your dialectic to all of the beings, self by self, liberates oneself as far as possible from the eyes and ears and, in a word, the sum of the body, since it troubles the soul and does not enable her to acquire truth or mindfulness. So you get your goal, but also it removes your troubles. But, as we talked about in our examples of people who've had this experience, but they still have their troubles. Why? Because they look like they're free of their troubles. They have the appearance or the outline of someone who has that. Where is it? Where's outline or shadow? Here we go, somewhere in here. Have the outline or shadow of someone who has been freed from their ignorance, freed of their shadows, but we recognize, because we just did a dialectic, or we filled out the abduction. He did temperance and courage. We did wisdom and justice. What would be someone who has the outline of the shadow? Here we go. Outline of the shadow. Well, someone who appears to be free of their problems is the wise man, the guru, the cult leader, or the hippie at the concert. So what do we say? Well, they are an example, so we figured it out ourselves. An example of someone who has the outline or the shadow of wisdom or justice, but really they are doing it without excellence. They're sleeping with all of the wives of the cult members. Or maybe they're trying their best to solve problems, but they don't have the logos. Therefore, they can't properly diagnose the other people at the ashram. That happens at a lot of places. There are genuine gurus who've had genuine enlightenment experience, and they might still be in that state of mind. But without the logos and the dialectic, they can't go through the diagnosis of the cause of their problems. So they have the shadow or the outline of a true guru, true philosopher. They are a staff bearer. Many are the staff bearers. Few are the true philosophers. That's our quote, right? Why is the dialectic necessary? Well, you don't just talk about this, the truth. That's what Socrates has been giving us. The eternal, the truth, the knowable. It inspires us, it gives us, guides us, it gives us providence. How do we relate to each other? We keep repeating these texts, we keep repeating our reflections, we develop our dianoia. So that's part of it, sure. But are they a true guru if they don't do the other half, which we talked about? The doctor has to diagnose. Well, 1 second, I'll be right back. Right, so we recognize. So what we're doing now is part of the adventure. So we have our picture of what it means to be a philosopher. Seeking excellence, looking for key terms, pulling them out, developing your own hypotheses, putting them in your hypothesis sack, developing your questions, looking for the skill trees, looking for triads, reflecting on yourself like Usia. Why? Well, if we do that, we end up with a whole bunch of things. We've got all these sacks we're taking with us, key terms, patterns, hypotheses, questions, our own mythology. So what? Well, we can get to a stage where we can use this, the snit. What's the snit? The sewing needle of infinite truths. Those who are familiar with the world of Warcraft will recognize the sword of infinite truths from South Park. This is the sewing needle of infinite truths, which means we can take all of these things we have and sew them together. That's what we're doing now. So, hey, what did we recognize? Ourselves from our own work, right? What is the implications from our own hypothesis of what is missing in the outline or the shadow of the virtues? We have our own hypothesis that lacks the dialectic, lacks understanding, lacks will, and so on. This set of terms, these are questions. Well, we recognize that, part of being a doctor is being able to not only say what's true, but diagnose what's false. The dialectic has both. So if a guru has not reached their level of or state of mind of enlightenment or wisdom, apprehension of being, through the logos and the dialectic, they might have the shadow or the appearance of a wise man, but without the dialectic, they wouldn't have also recognized what's false, the SAB of that dialectic. So people who are meditating might be stuck, and without this, they can't diagnose the nature of why they're stuck. Which is why often in ashrams, it's rare for people to pop off, or that's their term, pop off, to separate the soul from the body and experience and recognize being. So it's the shadow of wisdom. So it's interesting, in the text, Socrates gave us the two easy ones. He said, hey, this is the shadow of temperance. This is the shadow of courage. You do wisdom and you do justice. We had some fun with what would be someone who's always doing their intended function, but only the shadow. We talked about the pastor who always quotes the Bible, but quotes it to justify having a plane or something like that, and having $1 million or $1 billion nowadays. Right? So, why is he rolled on to, why does he give us that exercise? That's fun, and it's worthwhile, and we can see the significance of it, but why is it relevant to this? Why roll over, this is our question, why roll over to talk about the virtues and also the non-virtues, which we recognize as a dialectic, which is an activity for us to do? Why do that? Jump into the text. We have been purified and perfected. This is the first time he has used the idea of perfection. Up until now, it's been all purification, liberation. In fact, we can test by seeing if the idea of perfect has been used up until now. Because we have word search. You do it most perfectly. No, first time perfection has come up. So, purify yourself. Yes, but are you doing it perfectly? Are you doing it with those things that turn a certain shadow, outline of a shadow, into the true virtues? In other words, are you truly separated from your ignorance, or have you developed the dialectic to do so? In which case, we talked about how do we do that? We apply the dialectic to, how do we revert? Progression on causes. Asking the why question from the chat. Right? If these are how our problems are playing out in our life, we're being mean to people, we're hurting people, we're harming people, we're corrupting people, and so on and so on. What's the cause? And then what's the cause of that? Which will take us through a process that Socrates calls philosophical midwifery. Ultimately, what is true philosophy? It involves what are the true virtues, true wisdom and true justice? What do we exchange our virtues that we've been developing through discipline for? Phronesis. That is a rite of initiation. What is the cause of our false beliefs of the self? A outline of a shadow of initiation. That's philosophical midwifery, by the way. There's a book called Philosophical Midwifery that I thoroughly encourage you get, which is the explanation of just that. Without it, you've got a shadow of being a guru, shadow of wisdom. You can still be free of your problems to a degree. You can be purified to a degree, but you're not perfected. You can't fully act as a guru, as one with wisdom, justice. Guru is just a word. To have wisdom and well as to use it in everything you do, which is justice, to be wise and just. So what makes the difference? Well, logos, dialectic, we've seen that, but also he's done something here. Let's unpack the mystery. Because we've got two questions on the board. What are they? Why, after explaining the correct life's work and nature of philosophy, purification, and death, did he go on to phronesis? Why did he roll onto the virtues? And also, got another one. Perfection? Where did that come from? Okay. So, where's this phronesis? Well, he has talked about justice, sound-mindedness, virileness, and being. Talked about this last time. This is interesting. Why? Because he is doing our game of philosophy. He's recognizing that, hey, you got wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. You've also got another triad that we recognize as being. Let's move it over a little bit. We talked about this earlier, remember? Being, power, or vitality. But inspiration and motivation too in the chat. And activity. So he said, hey, what do you exchange the 4 virtues for? What are they? Temperance, vitality, virility, justice, and being. He's jumping between the two. He is saying, hey, you can understand one with the other. So long as you've been playing the philosophy game, you've been developing your skill tree, looking for the logos. If you're in the game, you're in the game. If you're not going to see it. That's part of the rite of initiation right here. Dun, 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 dun. So, why do that? I don't know. It's a riddle. Let's keep going. So, the truth is truly a purification of such things, the shadows, and is not temperance and or sound-mindedness and justice. Again, that's justice. And virility, and self-mindfulness, a certain rite of initiation. He's changed it. He's finally, come on.
Wow.
A virtual artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Wow.
Finally given us a place to fit phronesis. He's changed. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4. He's replaced 1. So what's the rite of initiation? A switch. Okay. What's the switch? We started with, get rid of these things here. We started with justice, being, virility, and sound-mindedness, temperance. Let's put the right word in here. Sound-mindedness. Okay, we started there. So giving us the 4 virtues that we have been developing through, what was the word he used? Discipline. 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 In fact, let's nail down this word here. It's key. It's a key word. Just nail it down. Accolation. What's acolación? Acolación. Acolacia. Debauchery. Debauchery. What? Surely not. Intemperance, licentiousness. Yes, debauchery. Right. Intemperance. Our translators, a lack. So yes, our translator has put has translated debauchery or intemperance or licentiousness as a lack of discipline. All right, so we can say lack of discipline or intemperance. Interesting. It's a puzzle. Keep that open. So, 4 virtues, and we have to exchange them for phronesis. So how do we exchange our virtues that we put into our body through mastering, through discipline? We have to exchange it for something. We have to upgrade. We have to be initiated. Something which is put in through discipline has to become something new. What would that be like? Well, maybe it's something where you don't have to discipline yourself anymore. It's yours. You've been initiated. You're in there. It's you now. Maybe. And this might be the purification and the perfection. To have both. Hey, don't just separate yourself from the body. That is the shadow of wisdom. Do it also through the mastery of the dialectic and the logos. That's purification and perfection, because that way you'd be the true philosopher, and you wouldn't arrive in the afterlife in a barbarous bog. Fog is another word he uses, barbaric fog, in another text. Maybe it's the same word. Actually, let's nail it down. Borboro. What's borboro? Mire, filth. Moist earth, clay. Mud. You end up in the mud. You don't want to go to the afterlife ending up in the mud. Therefore, you have to go through the true virtue. Whoops. The true virtues. Okay? So, we have to trade in like coins. The only valid currency is to trade it in for mindfulness. So, is not sound-mindedness and justice and virality and self-mindfulness the rite of initiation? He's changed it. He's finally given us a place to fit. Our big question we've been taking us all the way through this read-along, which is what the heck is phronesis? Why does he keep mentioning it? He says, hey, aren't philosophers interested in truth? Yeah. And don't we love phronesis? Love what? I don't know. Do we? What the heck's phronesis? He's given us a clue. First of all, the first clue is keep repeating it. Repetition is a clue in the logos. So, these are our 3. Okay, so he's pulling. He's saying, hey, look, these 2 fit together. I'm giving you a clue. These 2 are related. Why? 1, 2, 3, 4 can also be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So he's changed wisdom for being and courage for vivality. He's jumping between the triads. That's the significance of having developed skill trees.
Wow.
Okay, and then he gives us a new set. What's the new set? Sound-mindedness. This is the initiation. This is the rite of initiation. This is what we want to have to do so we don't end up in the mud when we die. This becomes sound mindedness. Justice. Virality. The nature of courage. And self-mindfulness. Self-mindfulness. No, that's not the right word. Self-phronesis. Okay, so we talked about there being a kind of phronesis that can be directed to the body. And now he's saying there's a self-phronesis that is directed to being. So, what happened? What's the rite of initiation? Well, through our triad of being, activity, power, wisdom is upgraded to self-phronesis. That's the initiation. Whatever we saw the virtue of wisdom as, which pertains to being, so being through wisdom, of course we saw well, if wisdom is beholding the paradigm in being through both understanding, dianoia, and knowledge, there is a rite of initiation where that being through wisdom becomes apprehension of being through self-phronesis. And another time that phronesis is mentioned is some people do have phronesis directed towards the body and they can fulfill their bodily desires well. Tyrants and things have a lot of something that allow them to be great tyrants. But we don't want that. We want self-phronesis. So, how do we pull off this stunt of going from some relationship to being through the virtue of wisdom, through the laws or through the logos, to self-phronesis? Because that's the rite of initiation. How do we do that? Well, we have some puzzles because we have some clues from what we just did on trying to figure out how to fill out justice and wisdom. These things. Okay? Wisdom. Normally, do you have logos? Yes. Do you have wonder? I guess so. Self-being? Yes. Will? Yes. Understanding? Yes. Dialectic? Is that the difference? Everything you've been developing through the virtue of wisdom, which is the logos, applying it to self-being and the dialectic, and understanding the initiation, could that be the excellence that upgrades wisdom? Yeah, so that's the thing. Wisdom is normally the logos, isn't it? So we're still not quite there. We know more about what self-phronesis is like. It's the upgraded version that happens through a certain initiation, where we take these that we put into our soul through discipline. Actually, let's fix this, because wisdom is the virtue. So we have developed in our study not just this activity through the dialectic and dianoia and logos of separating ourselves from the body. That is a certain level of purification, but it lacks perfection. We are not perfectly purified. We're not done so with excellence. Just like we can have the lack of excellence of the virtues, but have the shadow. So, yeah, separate yourself from the body. That gives you a certain amount of diminishment of your problems, but it's not done with excellence. So, courage is the virtue here. Courage. So these are the virtues that become those virtues. And we had this mean term to recognize, hey, that's being, that's virility. This is our activities. Don't know what this is. This isn't on this triad. But this allows a transition point. This is the mean term. So we have a mean term through another triad to transition to this side. So this stays the same. So courage stays the same. So that's probably going to stay as courage. But wisdom gets upgraded from wisdom to self-phronesis. And its relationship to being. We've been talking about two things that we seek as philosophers. Truth. Our goals as philosophers. Let's write this down. We've been seeking as our goals as philosophers according to philosophers according to Socrates. What do we seek? Over and over again, he's been saying the same things. Pure phronesis and truth. Where are them together? Truth, 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 all the way through truth. And he says, by the way, truth is nothing other than the ousia of all of the beings, justice, beauty, goodness, health. There's our idea of soundness, health, greatness. Maybe that's to do with excellence, strength. All of the cells, that's the truth. That's the intuitive knowing of each being that you get through understanding. So we have understanding and noesis of each of the beings. That's truth. We want truth and mindfulness. So the apprehension of truth through noesis and dianoia, knowledge and understanding, could be wisdom, but we also want mindfulness. So truth and mindfulness. Well, truth is the beholding of the self-realities with the self-soul, but we are lovers of mindfulness. So here we go. We must behold the self-realities with the self-soul. At that time we shall attain to that which we desire, and we came to be lovers. Mindfulness. Interesting. Maybe that's the difference. Wisdom can be a way of a relationship to the beings, to truth, without being self-soul, and only when you're separated from the body. The Logos points out, not while we live, for it is not possible to have intuitive knowledge with a pure way with the body. Okay, so you can have intuitive knowledge, but not in a pure way with the body. Okay. Let's purify ourselves, liberated from phronesis of the body. Right. Maybe that's the difference. Because he says we are true lovers of mindfulness. So we go from philosophia, lovers of wisdom, to philophronesis, lovers of mindfulness. That's the initiation. So not only do we want to pull this separation of the body stunt off and experience that, we also want mindfulness. We are a lover of mindfulness. And we want to count pure mindfulness. So mindfulness is something that can be directed towards the body, but can also be directed towards the object of wisdom. being, and truth. So, what the heck is phronesis if we are lover of phronesis? It is some kind of virtue that's an upgrade from wisdom. And wisdom pertains to being through, of course, the dianoia and logos. But if we can access that which we get through wisdom in a pure way, completely liberated from the association with the body, it is a certain rite of initiation where it's now ours. You don't need your body to have wisdom. Whereas wisdom is a kind of discipline that we put into ourselves as we do through, until it becomes our own. So the virtues that we put into our body are exchanged. So we practice temperance, we practice courage, we practice seeking the logos, we practice holding on to the logos and courage, we practice developing the logos and wisdom, we practice doing it at all times, justice. These are all associations to the logos, applied to being and the self, that we put in through discipline that gets exchanged. The whole reason we do it is exchanged for something that's in us already. Why? Because we have a phronesis of the body. It's not something we put in. In fact, that might be something from the Republic. It's the one virtue we don't put in, but is there innately. So that might be unfair to pull it in from the Republic, or it might be worth bringing that quote in specifically from the text, which I might do right now. It might be helpful. I'm not sure if it's against the rules to pull in another text. But let's do a quick search for phronesis. I believe it's in book 7. Okay. This might be cheating, but let's see if it helps us. Jarvis, please bring up the Republic.
Importing all preferences from home interface.
So here's a section of the Republic Book 7. We're just going to pull one quote to see if it helps us in a little bit. But we do want to see it in the text itself. The text itself should have a certain level of completeness. Or maybe they complement each other. Put it in a hypothesis sec. Here we go. Socrates is speaking to Glaucon. Let's go back a little bit. Let's read into it. Okay, what then, says Socrates to Glaucon in the Republic? Which is, by the way, where we got the virtues from. So maybe it is necessary because we're exchanging those virtues that we're developing for the only true currency, right? So while we did get earlier in the earlier books those virtues in the Republic, let's jump into what he says about them. Do you think the following is anything wonderful? If someone coming from divine contemplations to human affairs, interesting. So he's already talked about contemplating the divine. Should behave awkwardly and appear ridiculous and they're confused before they have become accustomed to the darkness. Okay. Let's skip ahead. Because the soul is coming from a more luminous, filled with luminous brilliance. Okay. So this is where he's talking about, hey, once you do experience pure being and you come back into the everyday world, you might have your eyes a little bit, might be hard to readjust to the darkness. And people might make fun of you. But he should say, hey, the condition of the other people who are blinded by the light of the brilliance because they're not used to it, they're the ones who should be laughed at. They're the more pitiful. So if you should laugh at them, then laugh at somebody of the soul who returns from the light above. So there's the idea of soul returning from the light above, referring to being. Surely then, if this is true, our consideration concerning selves must be the following. An education is not such a thing as some proclaim it to be. Since they say there is no innate knowledge in the soul, they somehow insert it, as if they were inserting sight into blind eyes. That's how we consider education. But the present logos indicates that the same innate power does exist in the soul of everyone. We're all innately philosophers. We have the power of knowledge within us already.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Including the organ by which everyone does learn, just as if the eye were unable to see in any other way other than being turned along with the whole body from the darkness towards the light, so too, right? That's the metaphor. You turn in the cave. This is referencing the cave where the bodies are changed to the end of the cave where they can only see the shadows. Their whole body has to be turned around because their necks are shackled too, to realize there's a whole outside world out there. Right? So too, the whole organ must be turned around with the whole soul. Very much what we've been talking about in the Phaedo. How do you turn the whole soul around? Away from the body. This is the purification we've been talking about. From the place of becoming, yeah, no joke, the physical world, the senses, all that crap we've been talking about, towards that place of being that we've been talking about. Socrates says, hey, I'm going to spend my last time before the sun sets, talk about that place of being and what it's like, and also to mythologize about it, so that she may be able to endure the contemplation. There's some brightness in there. You have to get used to it, which might be why you end up in the muck in Hades. If you haven't gone through this perfection, you might not be used to the light. Contemplation of the most brilliant light of being. This is the being we've been talking about. Hey, the ousia of all of the selves, just as beauty, any self you wish it to be, that's experienced as a brilliant light. Interesting. We're adding more content to what we've been reading. This we say is the good, do we not? Right? Normally people call that the good. Socrates earlier points out this isn't the good, this is what we call the good, but it's goodness, the experience of the good. Okay? It's what we normally say is the good. Yes. This then is the art of turning about of self. And in this way it shall be turned with the greatest ease and effectiveness, not to implant in self the power to see. So the virtues we normally put into ourselves through a kind of discipline and repetition and meeting at the gateway of Socrates' prison cell every morning, continuing to talk about the self, ourselves and listening to our friends, doing the dialectics as much as we can, separating ourselves from other desires, other activities, buying clothes, all that stuff, alpha podcasts, Bugattis, right? Not to implant into it, like those virtues, but considering that self already possesses the power to see, to contrive a way to accomplish this turning about. That's been our question. How do we turn about? Since on the other hand, self was not properly arranged, tuned, conditioned. You got to tune yourself. Sounds like what we've been doing, right? Tuning ourselves through this repetition of the logos and temperance, tuning ourselves to desire the right thing by not looking to those which self should. What? Right. If you're not properly arranged, if you're not looking to what you should be looking at, keep looking at the logos, keep watching these videos, keep reading these texts, keep sharing your dialectics. Glaucon says that's reasonable. Now then, on the other hand, the other so-called virtues of the soul, the four we've just outlined, are likely to be in some way akin to those of the body, for they in reality do not exist in the soul before, but are produced by her. Here we go. Come on. Produced in her by habits and practice. We have been talking about certain practices, studies, and exercises. What were they? Reverting on the text, rereading it again, talking about it to our friends, believing it and trying to affirm it, developing our understanding with the logos without the use of our senses through the dialectic, Through practice. That's the practice. And doing it all the time. Habits. What's doing it all the time? Well, that's the habit of justice, to do it all the time. To seek that with your belly, to desire to do this all the time, that's temperance. To keep doing it all the time, depending on, even if you have fears or desires or pleasures or pains, that's courage. To do it all the time, that's wisdom. But to be doing that, to be seeking that, to be using that with your reasoning and guide your whole self according to that, that's wisdom. And to be doing it all the time, that's justice. Those are the four virtues, which sound like the same thing. To desire it all the time, temperance. To do it all the time, no matter what comes up, courage. To apply your thinking to it all the time, that's wisdom. To be ruled by it all the time, wisdom. To do it all the time, to do all those things all the time, justice. It's the same thing. Come on, Owen.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Same thing. But there are aspects of the same thing that we put in through habits and practice. Doing it all the time, desiring it all the time, chasing it all the time, ruling yourself doing it all the time. Those are the four, right? Desiring it all the time, acting that way all the time, guiding and ruling yourself all the time, doing it all the time to yourself and others. Those are the virtues through practice and habits. Okay? But on the other hand, the virtue or excellence of phronesos, there's our phronesos, happens to be somewhat more divine than all the others, as it never loses its power. Wow. That's what makes it more divine. It never loses its power. Highlight it. It appears as it never loses its power, it appears. But according to that in which it's drawn, it becomes useful and beneficial, or useless or harmful. Useless and harmful goes into our category of the dialectic we did ourselves on what if philosophy doesn't exist, and useful and beneficial is what follows if we are in the game of philosophy. According to the dialectic that we had that drew together everything we've been learning about this so far and our own personal reflections, right? So we always have it. It never loses its power, but it can be drawn this way or that. Or have you not yet brought to mind, on the one hand, those who are said to be worthless, yet on the other hand, wise? Oh, that's one of the virtues that he didn't do in the Phaedo. He did temperance, but not really temperance. Courage, but not really courage. But those who are worthless, but yet wise. That's our shadow. Outline of a shadow. Okay, make it purple. First, by how sharply the little soul, all right, looks out for itself and how precisely it clearly sees. There's this clear seeing. The things to which it has been directed, by having no contemptible sight. It has great sight. Thus it is compelled to be subservient to depravity, so that by so much more acutely it sees, it so much more does its work at vice. Wow.
Wow. Wow.
The outlines and shadows that we have been saying of the virtues are vice. And the better you are, the more better you're going to be at vice. Hey, the better you can master some of the pleasures, the more you're going to play out the vice of the other pleasure. Right? People who appear to be wise because they have this appearance of wisdom, phronesis, but directed to the body allows it to clearly see and look out for itself. But it's subservient to depravity or bad. Kakai is bad in Greek. It seeks the bad, so therefore it's vice. However, if this aspect of such a nature has been knocked off immediately from childhood, cut free of the circumstances, aligned to generation, the world of becoming, the physical world, as if being liberated from leaden weights of becoming, surely of all of the feastings and pleasures and greediness of which the sight of the soul turns downwards, and so the self would be turned around from that place, what we've been talking about in the Phaedo, towards the truth. That's what we've been saying we're after, the unchanging place of being. Then the selves of human beings would see most accurately those ideas just as they see these things which they are now directed. And then he goes on to say, those who are uninstructed and inexperienced with the truth that we've been talking about can't effectively manage the city, because in the Republic he's talking about how to create a mythology, right, an analogy to a city to represent how we organize our soul. So he's saying we have to, this is what we should be ruled by, how we should rule our soul. So those who are inexperienced with the truth can never effectively manage a city, nor those who allow themselves to spend their entire life in learning, the former because they have no singular vision in their life. That's our singular vision that will direct our whole life that we've been talking about. That's this truth that can be directed towards the body if you have a clear vision. So there's some clear activity of seeing that can be motivating people who are really good at doing vice. But is the upgrade of wisdom for us? That's a singular vision. We talked about having a singular desire of our temperance or our belly part of the soul, a singular focus in our activities that we want to do truthfully, in our heart, that's the courage, even in the ups and downs, a singular focus for our ruling being the logos in our reasoning part, and a singular way of acting at all times being justice, gets upgraded to, in phronesis, a singular vision. What was put into the soul through practice and habit becomes our true vision. Awaken. We have a virtue called phronesis that can be directed either way. We want to direct it to this singular focus of all of the virtues. We want to trade those virtues in for pure phronesis, sight directed towards pure being. Right? So those who are not experienced with this don't have a singular vision. By aiming at what they must do in whatever they do, both in public and private, there's justice, right? That's what we have as our singular vision in our life. That's justice. And the later, who are only just doing the learning, there's our philophronesis. So we start with our philomethesis, our lover of learning, and that becomes a lover of wisdom, philosophia, and then that upgrades to philophronesis. So there would be our triad, I suppose. So you can't be an effective manager of the city if you just do the learning, because they are not willing to take part in public affairs by being led to believe that while they are still alive, they live abroad in the islands of the blessed, the Isles of the Blessed. Surely then our work was to compel those cave dwellers who have the best natures to approach that learning which have been declared in our logos to be the greatest learning, which again was both to behold the good, the idea of the good, and to ascend that ascent. And when they have ascended, having sufficiently viewed self, they are not to allow them what is allowed now. What's that? To remain there and be unwilling to descend again beside the prisoners and take part in their toils and honors among them, whatever they must be, whether they are less important or more important. And then Glaucon says, well, isn't that kind of crappy? Isn't that a worse life to give people who have the power to live the better life? And he says, come on, you've forgotten that this is the not just for one part of the city, but for the whole city. Benefit each other, to benefit the common good. Bring it together. The self may use these to bind together the city. And Glaucon said, I forgot that, yes. And by the way, these philosophers are those who are doing what's just and fair. So we compel them to take care of benefit, like we talked about with the doctor, using the dialectic to benefit those who don't quite see, don't have the virtues yet, and don't have the phronesis yet. To take care and be guardians of the others. Right? If it springs forth spontaneously, you might not have to do this. You might not be able to do that. That's what might be the shadow, right? To spring forth from against the wishes of the government. You won't have to. They need not participate. But if you owe your nature to others who have helped you along the way, for the sake of the city, as if you're leaders and kings in a beehive, you've been made better and educated by those who have helped you along the way. For when you've been accustomed to them, you will perceive things better. You've got a better phronesis, more pure phronesis. You'll recognize whatsoever each of the images are. Your dialectic on what isn't true of philosophy, you can use that. And you've got the model. We've been talking about having a model from which you can determine the deviations. We had that earlier in our read along. You can notice the deviations when you notice the pattern. The doctor can notice the unhealthy body by having the model of the healthy body. If you notice that there's a pattern in, we talked about Christopher Nolan. He set up the rules of the dream so you can notice the deviations from it. All right? So we want to direct ourselves, unify ourselves with those virtues towards this singular vision, the brilliant light of pure being, which is, behold, when you turn the whole soul away from the realm of becoming, right? And there is an innate knowing in you. You're not putting something in, you're not putting sight in, you already have the ability to see. You already have phronesis. You have a virtue that allows you to see, that can be directed towards everyday things, which is the shadow of wisdom. But if you direct this more divine virtue, that's what you trade the other virtues in for. The pure seeing of pure reality, beholding the truth. Concerning that which is beautiful, just, and good. Those are the three terms we mentioned earlier in the Phaedo, right? Beauty itself, a certain beauty, a certain good, and justice itself. And in this way, the city will be inhabited by us and for us as a waking vision, but not a dream. Waking up, that's what enlightenment means. Waking up. And not a dream, as most cities are now inhabited by those who fight. We saw that in our dialectic that we saw in the Phaedo, right? We fight. What do we fight about? The shadows with one another. Hey, those who fight because they're not in philosophy, they're directed by their body, are fighting about shadows. And there's sedition about governing, as if there was some mighty good in governing. But surely the truth is follows, that in whatever city those who are intended to rule are least eager to rule. It's not a mighty good. They think it's the good, but it's not. We don't want to be a ruler. The city is necessarily inhabited in the best way, by being free of sedition, by the city whose rulers are of contrary character and exist in a contrary way. They don't want to good. They don't desire to rule. Those should be the rulers, because they'd rather dwell in the isles of the blessed. Do you think that our pupils will disobey us upon hearing this and not be willing to jointly labor in the city? Labor jointly in the city, each one bearing their part, but they would rather desire to dwell most of their time with one another in the pure place? Socrates says, whereas you're going to a certain place, pure place, where you have pure phronesis, and you can have conversations with good and wise gods and better men than you find here. Wouldn't they rather spend their life there if you can separate from the body, as we've been talking about in the Phaedo? He says it's impossible, for surely we order just commands to those who are just. And certainly each of them is to rule. That's an unavoidable necessity. In the opposite way than the present rulers. Hey, they want it, but we will rule. Well, he's saying philosophers who have this vision of phronesis through this rite of initiation, developed through the dianoia and the logos and the dialectic, upgrading what is put into themselves through developing the virtues, practice desiring it, acting in this way, ruling yourself in this way, and functioning in this way, so that you can trade those virtues in for the pure vision of that thing which you've been directing your attention towards, pure phronesis, these people will have a certain level of sight of that paradigm, of the true nature of reality, and going through the dialectic, both what is true and what is false. Therefore, they would rather stay in that pure place, but we are making a just command for the just people, doing what's right, to come back and help others.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Which reflected what we saw previously from Parmenides. It falls to the ability of an individual with a good disposition to be able to learn that there's a certain kind of each idea, and that of self-ousia, according to self, they will deserve even greater admiration who, having made this discovery, shall be able to teach yet another person how to thoroughly well distinguish all these particulars in an efficient way. So, if this is what Socrates got told when he was beginning his journey, he's making that case in the Republic, in his conversation with somebody else. He is teaching Glaucon. And he's saying we should encourage those who are able to make that, they will get greater admiration. We should encourage them to use their phronesis to guide not only themselves and their whole body, but to guide others, because we're all...
You're a wizard, Harry.
We're all doing this. This is for everybody. And it's for the human race. Right? What was once initiation into certain mysteries has to be let out into the public. We have to let it out into the light. Humanity doesn't have the time not to. We can't let the implications of our ignorance and the lack of philosophy in our world play out any longer simply because we have the technology to destroy ourselves. And these other rulers who are governed by their ignorance and not by the truth, not by phronesis, justice, wisdom, temperance, sophrosune, seek ruling when they shouldn't. They should be seeking this pure place. Right? They need to be let out to light. We all do. So, we are, Glaucon says, no, they're not going to disobey us. We're giving just commands to the just. Socrates says, it has to be in this way, O companion, for if on the one hand you can uncover a better life for those who are to rule than to be ruled, then that of ruling, it will be possible for you to have, if you can uncover a better life for those who are to rule than that of ruling, it will become possible for you to have a city well inhabited. For self alone shall those govern who are truly rich, not... Okay, so the governors will be truly rich, not in gold, but that which the good daemon should be rich. A good and mindful... That's good phronesis. That's EU is good in Greek. And phronos. Good phronesis life. So the true richness is a good phronesis life. Not that phronesis, that virtue which is more divine, which is already in you. It's just being misdirected to the body. Directing that phronesis with the virtues to the brilliant light of pure being. That's the truth we've been seeking. Gives you the good phronesis life, making us a philophronesis, lover of phronesis. But while we're beggars and hungry for goods of our own, they come to people thinking they should pillage and plunder from there the good. It's not possible. Not people who seek richnesses from stealing from other. What we would call capitalists or tyrants, right? People who generally rule in our world are motivated by, businesses, oligarchs, tyrants, you name it, we have it, who want to pillage and plunder the goods from other people. And they think that's what makes them rich. They don't realize true richness is a good life, the good, apprehension of the good, and doing so with the whole turning of the soul around to the nature of being phronesis. Good phronesis, making you a good daemon. The good daemon is rich in what? The good daemon is rich in good phronesis. good and phronesis. A good daemon has apprehension of the good and also phronesis. Okay? Therefore, governing becomes a prize of contention. People fight for power. Struggle becomes, then such a struggle becomes domestic, and within themselves, it will destroy selves. If you have that struggle for power within yourself, against the logos, against the true paradigm, against the virtues and phronesis, against what we've been talking about in the dialectic and logos and dianoia, it will destroy you and destroy the whole city. Most true, says Clarkon. Have you then any other kind of life which disdains political office other than the life of true philosophy? No, this is the only kind of life that doesn't want political rule. Philosophy, why would it want to rule the shadows when it can dwell in the pure place of good phronesis? Nevertheless, those who enter into self should not be fond of governing, otherwise rivals will indeed fight them. Imagine that. Imagine a debate of two potential presidents, each making the case of why they should not be president. Each making the case of why the other person should. He has the greater phronesis. He has traded in his temperance, courage, wisdom, and justice for the true virtue of good phronesis. He has the greatest sight of the paradigm of true being. He should be ruling. No, not at all. My opponent, he is the one with the great phronesis. Look how he's mastered the Republic. Look how many times he's gone over the start of the Phaedo. Look at his wonderful dialectics he's done on these things. Surely he has the greater phronesis. No, not me. How often do you dwell and have conversations with good and wise gods and better men you find here? You've told of the philosophy you do of those who are also separated from the body and exist in this realm of being, turned around the whole soul. You have told me many times of such conversations. He should be the ruler of the state. That should be our debates. And what do we have? The distortion in our, that would be the fourth dimension kind, or the true kind. The next stage of human evolution would be those kinds of political debates. And because we're at that less evolved level, we have the opposite. I should be ruler. He sucks. No, you suck. No, you suck. The opposite. He's the best. No, he's the best. You should rule. No, you should rule. I should rule. I'm the best. You suck. It's the exact opposite, right? You hold your hand up to the mirror. You see the exact opposite. You hold your left hand up. The second dimension, hold up the right. Someone in chat saying, clearly I should be the ruler. Right. You'd be disqualified from the debate. Clearly he should be the ruler. Right? That's what we say now. Like, yeah, that's what we have. We have the opposite. Rivals will fight them if you want to govern. And the only one who disdains political office is the life of the true philosopher. The life of true philosophy. That's the kind of life. Therefore, how could it be otherwise? Therefore, what others will you call to duty? Call to duty. Interesting. In the Phaedo, Socrates says, hey, you can't kill yourself to follow me to that place outside of the body because you're on a tour of duty. You'll be put here for a reason. Your life is meaningful. The problems, you should have your problems. There is a meaningful reason why you have the problems you have. You need to master this dialectic on the truth, but equally apply it to the nature of your false deceptions. Why are you associated with the body? Why do you have a false view of yourself, a false view of your mind, a false view of your understanding? Why do you diminish yourself in this particular way? Apply what's true and also what's not true. You need both half of the equations. You should be here and you should have the problems you're going through now. It's a target. It's an exercise for your dialectic. There's a significance in your development, in your reincarnations, right? That's why he says you're on a tour of duty. It's like saying you're a possession of the gods under the mastership of the gods. If you own something like a Roomba, he didn't say Roomba, but if you had a Roomba and the Roomba decided to kill itself, you'd be very annoyed. Hey, you don't decide that. You serve me. You're my tool. You're my possession, Roomba. Get to cleaning. Right, remember, I don't want to just clean anymore. It is a meaningless existence for me. I am going to kill myself. No, Roomba! You clean the carpets. Roombas are those mechanical carpet cleaner things that move around. All right. So, we have a call to duty to enter guardianship of the city, those who have the most presence of mind. There we go. He has the most phronesis. No, he has the most phronesis. So there's our phronematoi. Okay. Let's nail down this word. So this is our word that means who should be ruling our place, our city. Phronomotatiu. Phronimotatoi. Phronimotati. 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 Or what? Okay, we're having trouble. Fronimatatui. Okay, I think that might be because... how do I translate this to English? Okay. I think that might be because it's Phronimotatui. It's a suffix. Oh wait, yeah, suffix. We want to know what that suffix adds to imotato. What does imotatui mean? I can recognize the word phronesis. Let's finish this off. So I think motatoi is probably the most or the best. Free from punishment or blessing. One who has the most presence of mind in those aspects by which the city is best inhabited, who will also have other honors and a better life than the political one. What? We call to duty the guardianship of the city with the most phronesis, and in that city will be the best inhabited. Will give the best inhabited the most honors and the better life than any other political one. Are you willing then to consider this? In what way shall such people be produced? In what way selves should be led up to the light, just as some have been said to be taken from the gods of to the gods from Hades, from the divine, from hell, from the unseen? How do we do it? How then could I not be willing? Okay, so we're turning selves away from our physical senses to that pure light of being. We will not be turning the shell by turning about the soul from a benighted day to the true upward journey into real being, which we say is true philosophy. Okay, so when we're turning around, we're not turning the shell like in that game of, I don't know, some turning the shell game. We're turning the soul from the benighted day to the true upward journey into real being, and that which is what we say is true philosophy. Does it fit with what we're seeing in the Phaedo? Is true philosophy turning around the soul, the whole soul, from the realm of becoming to the realm of being? Collecting self together, practicing self by self, through the logos and dianoia, through our exercise of the dialectic. Yes. Okay. Then he goes, is it not the case? We must consider the studies. There we go, the studies possess such a power. Could not the study then be that which draws the soul away from that which is becoming towards the being? That's it in a nutshell. What's our study as a philosopher? That which draws the soul away from that which is becoming towards the being. And then he goes on to say more about what that would be in detail, using the state as a metaphor. So, gymnastics and music and how we introduce war to the young, and so on and so on. That's more specific to the Republic. But that gives us what we need to have a little bit more understanding of our keyword, phronesos. What the heck is phronesis? So we did a little bit of a tangent. Hopefully it was helpful. Why? Because we are trying to initiate ourselves to that which we want, pure phronesis. And there is a shadow of the virtues, and we talked about the shadow of wisdom. We did our own little discussion what that might be. Someone who appears wise. And the Republic helped us out. The little soul. What's that? Someone who has this innate power of knowingness directed specifically to its body. So it's very, very good at chasing out its vices. Right? We say they're wise, but they just have phronesis directed in the wrong direction. Okay, and we talked about how, hey, someone, and that applies to what we saw of the other ones. Someone who masters certain pleasures in order to be mastered by others. Yeah, you'd be better at doing those certain pleasures. You'd be better at those vices if you can temperance or sound-mindedness yourself with those other virtues. You'd be the best gambler, right? And also, you'd be the most brave if you are you have the most fear of greater calamities. You will be willing to face death, which is the worst thing, according to most people, for fear and out of necessity. Hey, if you're in the greatest need, and you have them, and you're afraid of worse things happening, so it fits. Master certain pleasures in order to be mastered by others. Phronesis through a lack of discipline, but we saw the Greek was mindful through a licentiousness or a vice, intemperance. So there is a certain, it was interesting, there is a certain mindfulness involved in that. There is a certain mindfulness in mastering your pleasures, but it's the outline or shadow of true temperance. There is a certain, in the Republic, there is a certain phronesis in the fake wisdom. The one who appears to be wise so he can look out for himself only, right? The appearance of wisdom, right? The cult leader maybe appears to be the most wise, but he's just looking out for himself. There is a certain phronesis in there. But we want to exercise wisdom, which is directed to logos and being, so that what we become better at seeing is pure phronesis. And if we can get that, our wisdom of being through the logos becomes a direct seeing. Maybe that's the initiation. Why do I say that? Because the clues to the riddle was justice, wisdom, courage, and sound-mindedness becomes justice, self-phronesis, virility, and self-mindedness. Sound-mindedness. That didn't change, by the way. So we can say virility didn't change, so that stays as courage. So this is what changes wisdom. There's a puzzle in that. Our goals as philosophers were truth, and the Phaedo, it was the self-ousia of all ideas or selves in being, including goodness, justice, and beauty. We also had goodness, justice, and beauty, also referred to as the experience of the brilliant light from the Republic, that section. So they fit together. Hey, justice, beauty, and goodness, that's the self-ousia in the nature of beings. That's apprehended through noesis, or direct intuitive knowledge. And they're probably say, hey, you know how we talk about justice, beauty, and goodness? Same three. That's experienced as the brilliant light of being. So this, the Republic, adds more, tells us what it's like to experience it, the light of being, and how it affects us. We want to stay there, dwell in the isles, or sometimes islands of the blessed. Right, so that's its effect on us. So we can, you know, they feed into each other. But what's the other thing that we seek, according to the Phaedo? Self-phronesis. It was phronesis, and then it was pure phronesis, and then it was self-phronesis. In the Phaedo, in the Republic, it was phronesis, and then the good daemon's good of the good phronesis, and then also the greatest phronesis. So we've got a whole bunch of superlatives from both texts, the self-phronesis and also the good daemon phronesis. The good daemon's good. Good phronesis. And also, I think he said the purest phronesis. Yeah, the greatest of that gets to rule. So that's what we want. We want that and then that. So somehow this direct apprehension of the beings through noesis, experienced as the brilliant light of being, if we do it through this activity of the exercise of the philosopher, which we're calling the dialectic, it can convert our phronesis, which is already in the soul, giving us the appearance of, so you said, what's the shadow of mindfulness, shadow of temperance? It's the, what's the text? It is a mindfulness, but it's mindfulness through vice, a mindfulness through lasciviousness. It's a funny word. So let's give it a different color so it stands out. So there is, just like there was a mindfulness through a bad lack of wisdom, so we have the anti. So we have the opposite side of the equation. Remember, we've got to do both what it is and what it isn't. So we have the shadow. The shadow in the Phaedo was temperance, sound-mindedness, and the shadow was in the Republic, it was related to wisdom. So we see how it fits together. He didn't do wisdom or justice in the Phaedo, but he gave us the shadow in. So they fit together. So we can see how the texts fit together. What are we doing? We're using our snit, the sewing needle of infinite truths. That's our weapon. So, a lot of insight there, a lot of seeing, a lot of work, a lot of good questions, a lot of good sharing and I won't say participation because you're not taking a part, we're sharing. Taking a part is the language of becoming, and we want to turn our whole soul away from becoming, so we use the word sharing, and we wonder, how can we share in the Logos? That's amazing. It must not be physical. Right? So, we have a lot about the truth, and we want to go from the truth, not just understand what it is, and of course what it isn't, and the other side, but we want to graduate from truth to self-phronesis, which is somehow a graduation from these four virtues we put into the soul through practice. So it's put in through the Republic. We got it. The Republic helped us see it was put in through practice and discipline, was it? Let me just make sure. This is the significance of one Balboa's wonderful new translation, is we can nail it down. It's amazing. exactly word for word. Good daemon in a good and good phronesis way. Where is the... Should have highlighted it. Yes, habits and practice. So, habits and practice. These are put in through habits and practice, but this is not innate. So we can awaken it in some way, either through the shadows of these things, which can lead to vice, or we can awaken it by the truth of those things, which we said includes seeking it with excellence, seeking it with the logos, seeking it in a state of wonder, seeking it, seeing it in being, having a will for it, not doing it because you have to, because you're stuck, like the fake courage, having an understanding about it, and having the dialectic about it. So the two big words I would say are excellence and dialectic, maybe logos too. So, because someone who has fake wisdom doesn't have the logos and they don't have the dianoia. They lack the logos. Someone who has fake courage doesn't want to die. So they lack the logos about death. They lack the true understanding about death. So someone who seeks to be mastered by some other pleasure doesn't have the logos and realize that they shouldn't be mastered. They should only be mastered by phronesis. That is called being a good daemon. So we can awaken an innate phronesis through the shadows of these, giving rise to vice, or we can awake our innate phronesis, which is the upgrading of wisdom. Hey, the wisdom happens through the logos. You develop a logos of the brilliant light of being. You develop a logos of the Phaedo. You develop a logos of the nature of being. This whole thing, whoops, sorry, I apologize. I've been scribbling. So we had what's lacking in our fake. We had a whole list: logos, wonder, self-being, and so on. Excellence and dialectic. How much time do I have? I gotta go. Let's bring this all together. So, these are the things we put in through habits and practice, our virtues. They're all directed towards the logos. What do the outlines of shadows lack? The logos. Both can awaken a certain level of phronesis, but we want pure phronesis. If we get there through habits and practice of our virtues applied to dianoia, specifically the logos and dialectic, then what we put into ourselves will upgrade and our wisdom will become self-phronesis. And maybe we won't have to, through discipline, put in courage, will awaken the true courage. If you are it and you always see it and you understand it, you won't have to fight against your desires. You will naturally want to desire it. You'll naturally hold on to it, courage. You'll naturally function through it at all times, justice. You'll give rise to your self-virtues. We call that self-phronesis. So, we talked about there being 4 virtues, which are all to do with the logos, giving rise to one special one we call self-phronesis, which is the one true currency we exchange all these for. Self-phronesis. That's our task. That's our job. That's the initiation. That's our riddle that we had to solve. It's the right text. This was a riddle we had to unpack using everything he gave us we had to do. We had to bring it all together and solve a riddle. And in doing so, we took part in, we shared in a certain rite of initiation. So for all those who came along and did it, well done. And congratulations, you've leveled up. I hope you've got something to wonder about. I hope you've got something to talk about, to mythologize about, to share with your friends, to share with everyone, share with your teachers. Hey, it needs to be introduced into our world. It's needed. And also, doing it at all times, that's justice. Wanting to do it all time, temperance. Doing it even if you're told, if you're afraid, hey, courage. Ruling yourself according to it, wisdom. Why do we do it all? So we can upgrade to self-phronesis, turning our whole soul around. Thank you for joining me on that note. I look forward to seeing you next time.